Counselor Hershey. Present. Counselor Couch.
Here.
Counselor Davis.
Here.
Counselor Stepp.
Yes.
Counselor Russo.
Yes.
We have a forum.
All right, let's stand for pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, are there any agenda changes or conflicts of interest this evening?
No, but I'll excuse myself from the consent agenda since I was not here last meeting.
Just for the record, because I have this, Counselor Stepp is going to excuse herself from voting on the consent agenda because she wasn't at the last meeting. All right, citizens appearing before council for public comments for items not on the agenda. So if it's on the agenda, please reserve your comments for that time. We will not be taking public comment tonight on the R2 development 480 Donegan. Is there anybody that would like to do public comment? For items not on the agenda? Okay. I don't.
Did Gary sign the list?
Yeah. Do we know where that list is? Let's, can we get it up to the front?
Ryan can call it. Ryan, do you want to do it?
Gary Vick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Gary Vick, 614 Cowden. This is not about 2A and 2B, or 2A and 2B on the agenda tonight? Somewhere, I heard. Maybe not?
No.
They're not.
No, they're not.
Okay. I was not involved in the recent petition that would have required the city to get approval from its citizens to make changes to the airport. Did you just cut me off by 30 seconds?
I started it when you
Restart
said
that,
your
I was
name.
waiting on the clock to show up. Seriously?
I don't run the clock. I don't.
Yeah, go ahead and just reset it to 3 so that
Okay, 3
we can
minutes,
start
thank you.
complaining.
I wasn't involved in the recent petition that would have required the city to get approval from citizens to make changes to the airport. But when I heard the city rejected 80% of the initial signatures, it really kind of caught my eye. The process had been supervised by a top-notch law firm, and the city didn't want it on the ballot to begin with. I think we all know that. So it kind of made me wonder, was it even possible for the city to have put a thumb on the scale when they approved the signatures? I don't know, let's talk about it. I'd like to use one of the petitions, number 10, there were 35 volumes. I'd like to use volume 10 as an example of what happened. It had 85 signatures, the city initially accepted 61. Of these 24, 4 were rejected for illegible signatures, 1 for no middle name when none was required, 1 for using a ditto symbol for the date to reference what was above, and several were rejected because they had moved within the city after registering to vote, and there's nothing wrong with that. County election officials would never do this, but the Glenwood officials did. And we know that the city did not really want the petition language to see the light of day. But wait, there's more. During the cure period, the entire volume, number 10, which originally had 61 good signatures, was completely rejected. 61 good signatures one day, 0 the next. Petitioners were never told why. None of the 61 counted in the final tally of 523. Boy, that sure would have put it close to the 600 the city said were needed. You know, other volumes were rejected the same way, some because pages showed wear, tear, and soil in other pages, and pages were skipped or signed out of order. There's nothing wrong with that when you read the law, when you read the code. I wrote an op-ed claiming hundreds of valid elector signatures were rejected using these, I hate to use the term, Trump-style tactics, but that's what they were. And I stand by my statement. the petition should have been approved. I can't cover all of the data in 3 minutes, but I'm going to give each of you a call and try to schedule the time to do so. My call should take about 30 minutes, and I hope you'll take it. There are 1,000 disenfranchised citizens who signed that petition, and potentially 1,700 more that signed petitions on other items tonight. If you can count, that's 2,700 people, which is, I think, more than, in many cases, voted in the last election. Probably need to be thinking about recalls if we don't do this right. My suggestion is that you wait for the signature count of the next petition.
Time's up, Gary. Thank you. Next, Ryan.
Stephen Shute, 316 Sunny Acres, Glenwood. My son Joel and I are pilots, mostly for getting to our tiny gas rural utilities. Maybe you saw the article in the Post on us last week. We gathered together about 80 signatures for the airport referendum. There were a few issues, but we had 75 legitimate citizen signatures. Out of those 75, you didn't have to count very far to get to 1,000 years of Glenwood residency. Floyd and Levon Demos, Villain Phyllis Coleman, Glenn Botter, Kenneth Ruth Edmonds, a dozen others. Every one of those who signed did so with some comment, oh, I love the airport. The city threw them all out. Then the city allowed 61 of them. Then the city finally negated all of them, every one of them. I don't have to tell you whether this was the clerk or the city attorney or the mayor, we see the city as you. Last week at Rotary and at church, when I told them that you had thrown out all of them, every one of them, and the majority of 1,100 others gathered, my friends, the Glenwood voters, were pretty upset. When I explained that the city had manipulated the number of signatures required, told us first 600, not 300 as is required, and then gave us 500, but declared, oh, the 300 is too late for that, and then slipped a last-minute ballot issue in on the ballot instead. Then those friends, the Glenwood voters, were levitating off the floor. I've lived here most of my adult life. I love this town, I love its people, and the environment and the airport. For the most part, I've appreciated the efforts of many city council people, many who I've known. You have tough decisions, and you spend a lot of time working on them. You've paid your city attorney hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this bait and switch ballot may seem clever to some of you, but for the rest of us, it just looks sleazy. With my petition, I told my friends this: the city may find some great use for the airport, and I'll understand, but after 90 years, that choice should be the vote of 3,000 or 4,000 people, not a 4-3 vote of the council, including some who've lived here about 15 minutes. Those issues will lose, which was intended by the 2 or 3 who dreamed this up thinking they would close the airport. But for the rest of you, this is the time for courage, not for sleazy, to let your voters actually decide what's best for this 90-year-old jewel.
Ryan?
Joe Mueller?
Good evening, I'm Joe Mueller. I live at 1113 Hubinger Drive. I'm a private pilot and I own an airplane that's based out of the Glenwood Springs Airport. And I'm here to publicly kind of go on record to help clarify maybe some misconceptions or perceptions of some things going on related to ballots, the ballot that's on the issue right now, or up for the voters right now. I have in front of me a transcript of Mayor Godis of a document that he wrote at a recent issues and answers forum that was presented at CMC. All right, and this was read aloud to the people. Among the things he talks about necessary improvements needed at the airport, safety improvements and so forth. He makes a list of some things. Then he mentions in a paragraph there are an additional $11 million in upgrades and improvements that are specific to small private planes and their need for a runway. and it's stated in here, the improvements have been recommended by the airport users, of which I am one, and the volunteer airport commission and staff. That is not correct. The airport users, myself being one, was never consulted on the ballot issues that are before the city, and the airport commission was not consulted on that either. I went to the commission meeting this morning, and all of the commissioners agreed. They had not been consulted, yet this is publicly stated that this is how this ballot has been raised up. So I'm here to say, I want to vote against this measure, and I want everyone that can hear me to vote against this measure, yet I stand to be the one who appreciates the improvements the most. Does that even make sense? Or maybe something isn't right that's going on here. So what I'd like to say, if this ballot measure gets voted down, which I really hope it does, it's not a vote against the airports. It's a vote against irresponsible ballot issues promoted by the city staff for items the users don't even want or need. Thank you.
Charles Knut.
That's Knut.
My apologies.
Thank you. My name is Charles Knut. I live at the ranch at Roaring Fork in Garfield County. I'm an airplane and hangar owner at Glenwood Springs Airport. It's not a high-budget operation. My motto is, I drive old trucks so I can fly old airplanes. It's not a high-budget operation. Nonetheless, aviation has been important to my corporate events business, whose revenue is all from out of state and taxed in Colorado. I'm also a flight instructor working with clients and students who are based in Glenwood. I also volunteer for Angel Flight West, flying disadvantaged patients and their families to non-emergency medical appointments. And I volunteer for Young Eagles, providing aviation experiences for kids that can lead to career opportunities. I don't pretend to speak for every pilot in Glenwood Springs, but I believe my story is typical. We've worked hard to achieve our ratings and currencies. We're eager to share our resources with the community, and we willingly work with the airport's virtues and limitations. The virtues of Glenwood Springs Airport are many and have been widely discussed. They include not being Aspen, not Eagle, not Rifle. The Glenwood Springs Airport is right size for the kinds of operations that benefit the city and support our unique commerce and lifestyle. To close the airport to all but emergency helicopters would be to sacrifice a special asset. It would be like sacrificing an endangered species that inconveniently stands in the way of a housing development, like sacrificing art classes or sports in a school with financial problems. Are things so dire in Glenwood Springs that we need to start sacrificing our assets? Ballot issues 2A and 2B are written as if to address the limitations of the airport and as if to maximize its expense. The 4 mil levy would, of course, be objectionable, and the debt service on that would account for nearly half of the funds expended. But as for the improvements, the cost of the tunnel, which is part of what's in there, should be a part of the budget for the South Bridge, not the airport. The remaining listed improvements to the airport don't require a tax increase. They can be achieved with city approval by existing airport enterprise funding and through proposed private development. The recommendations of the Airport Commission and airport users were ignored in the drafting of issues 2A and 2B. No one wants what's in these issues, and no one expects them to pass. Those who are familiar with Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged may recognize the strategy of destroying an institution by lavishing money on it. Let's not waste taxpayers' money by doing that to our airport. If the people of Glenwood Springs choose to sacrifice their airport, let them make that decision directly. Thank you for your service to the community. Thanks for letting me be heard.
Dave Mooney. David Mooney, I apologize.
I did not realize you couldn't talk about R2.
No,
Scratch mine.
sorry.
Dave Merrick.
Okay.
Close, it was close. Okay, good evening. My name is David Merrick. I live at 1504 Mountain Drive. I am essentially at the north end of the runway, just slightly off to the side of it. I have lived there for coming up on 37 years. I am not a private pilot. I have been on the Airport Commission at the current time, and I was on the Airport Commission prior to being on City Council and during my time on City Council. The Airport Commission was not consulted on this. Were we to be consulted? These are items on within the improvements that should be done by private capital, and that private capital is available. all the private capital needs is the permission to go ahead and do that with a reasonable certainty that they would be there for a long period of time. The fuel farm can be constructed and financed. The Unicom that was listed is already underway. The runway lights are not needed or wanted. It is a daytime operation, and it would not be safe to try and operate a nighttime operation. The tunnel itself has been a component of the South Bridge for the past 14 years. The preferred plan was a tunnel under the runway. It was listed in the EIS, and it was listed in the record of decision. The record of decision also states that there would be no impediments to the airport operation other than during construction, no impacts. And to do otherwise would be in violation of the record of decision, which the city has signed and agreed to. This should be treated as a component of the South Bridge project. There is no way that I could, in good conscience, ask the citizens of Glenwood Springs or any individual taxpayer to pay for improvements that could be financed and paid for by the pilots and the other users of the airport. This seems to me to be like almost like a hostage letter to the citizens of Glenwood and to the supporters of the airport to pay up or get out. I thank you for your time, and I am very disappointed that this was put on the ballot. Thank you.
Joel Schutt.
Good evening. My name is Joel Schutt, 111 2nd Street. I'm on the airport board. I was born and raised in Glenwood Springs. This is the first time I've felt unwelcome in my own town, and I just want to convey my severe discontent for the city leadership and the city staff and the treatment of the citizens on this petition and this mill levy. As a member of the airport board, we are aware of some of the improvements on this wish list, but we were never generally consulted on this mill levy. After the September meeting of City Council, I asked John Godis personally why he didn't consult us, and he told us it's because we put out a petition that he didn't know about. Well, he had 4 months to know about it. We had 2 days. I'm on the board. We had 2 days before this mill levy came out, and then you guys were asking why no one showed up and no one cares and no one knows about this. Well, I know about the airport, and how is the rest of the citizens of Glenwood and the Valley supposed to know about it if you put it 2 to 5 days, however long it was? I'm not trying to call people out. I'm just saying that I've lost a lot of confidence in the city leadership and city staff through this. And I think you guys have gone through a very dishonest approval on this mill levy in a way that you're sneaking it through. And I think you should reconsider how you treat your citizens and how you treat this city, because I think that's very important. And I feel like a lot of people are really mad about this. I cannot in good conscience support this mill levy because there's no reason a bridge project and a tunnel project should be at all hooked up to the capital costs of the airport. Those can be paid with user fees. We've proven that. We've never asked for any of this stuff. It's a list that someone made up a week or two before this mill levy was proposed, and then it just got snuck through. I mean, John told me himself, it's almost a personal vendetta against the airport and maybe not the citizens, but I mean, he admitted it to me, and I have witnesses if you want. So anyway, again, I don't think this should have ever gone through. I think the petition should have gone through. We had enough citizens. These are not delinquent people. These are people who've lived in this community a long time. They're respected citizens. A lot of them own a lot of businesses. I think you should respect that, and I think you guys should reevaluate your positions. Thank you.
Shane Evans.
Evening. My name is Shane Evans. I live at 1073 County Road 111, Garfield County. In 1983, I co-founded a Glenwood Springs-based company that has employed hundreds of people over the past 38-plus years. The use of the Glenwood Springs Municipal Airport has contributed to the success of our business operations for several decades. Been a volunteer Angel Flight West pilot, donating flights to patients and their family members in need of transportation for medical treatment. I've also served as a volunteer Young Eagles pilot and Glenwood Springs Air Expo pilot over the years, and have donated time and money repairing and maintaining the airport. Historically, the airport has been financially self-supporting and not a burden on taxpayers. I'd like to express my concern regarding the current ballot questions pertaining to the airport and the proposed South Bridge project. I believe the ballot language is potentially misleading, unclear, and confusing. Proposed airport-related expenditures outlined within the ballot questions have not been reviewed with or endorsed by the city's airport committee and are considered unnecessary and or excessive by the airport users. I'm concerned the airport's future will not be appropriately determined by the voters in a clear and transparent manner. Ballot questions 2A and 2B fail, it would not indicate a lack of support for the airport. Thank you very much for your service and my time, the opportunity.
All right. Next, council comments, but Carl, go ahead.
Actually, I would just like to take a moment. There were some really pointed attacks on particularly the city clerk and the work that he did, abiding strictly by the statutes with regard to reviewing the petitions, which is what Ryan did. He worked countless hours to do that. These are not rules that he gets to make up. They are rules that apply across the board to every petition, in every home rule municipality, on every charter amendment in the state of Colorado. And so, you know, we have somebody from that law firm who actually worked on that petition in the room representing another client this evening. And what I will say is that there were two opportunities to legally challenge the clerk's decision, both his first decision and his second decision. And apparently the determination was made not to challenge that. He went through it in excruciating detail and in putting in, like I said, just an amazing job of trying to do a fair and even-handed job. That same law firm made an open records request trying to find the evidence that Gary Vick in his public comments seemed to gin from the air, since he wasn't involved in the petition process by his own admission. And so I find his allegations against staff both unfounded and unworthy and offensive, because this staff worked tirelessly to do a good job on this. And so I want you as council and I want the public to know that simply making things up about people who work here is both unfair and unworthy. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Other council comments? Charlie?
Yeah, I guess I'll echo the level I can. I didn't look at the petitions. It's not our job as council to look at the petitions and determine that. We have legal staff and city clerk who I know worked long hours because I tried to reach him and he never could reach him because he was working on this. And he should, because it's a very important issue to the community. And had the petitions been done in accordance with law, there would have been a ballot question. It would have been on there, and there's nothing that would preclude the group from coming back with another petition that's done accurately and whether its signatures are collected accurately and put it on the ballot. I'm sorry. So I'll try to speak up. I always think I talk loud and I rarely say don't. So my view is that just because the petitions were accepted doesn't mean it can't be done again, and they could do that. They chose to do so. As Carl indicated, I know as a lawyer that there is a means to challenge that, and that was not that opportunity was not taken for whatever reason. Moving on, I can't comment on 2A and 2B because Tabor won't let me comment, so I won't say anything else about the ballot questions because I can't do that. Now, turning to other city business, as you know, I'm a liaison for the Tourism Promotion Board. Last week ago Tuesday, I attended a day-long conference in which a number of things were discussed about recovering from the pandemic and the impacts it has had on the community. And one of the recommendations made from that group, and then at a tourism board meeting earlier this week, a recommendation was, and a motion was made, and I was asked to, as a liaison to bring it to the council, and that is to change the name of the Tourism Promotion Board, the Tourism Management Board. So I would make a motion that we direct city staff to do the appropriate ordinance or whatever it would be to change the name of the Tourism Promotion Board to the Tourism Management Board.
If we make it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that? Would there be a corresponding change in duties to the board at all?
Just a date.
To reflect
The belief is that better encompasses actually what they're doing. They're managing the tourism budget, they're managing tourism in the community. That was the reason for it.
Okay. You done?
Yeah.
Further discussion on the motion?
Tony, you have
I'm gonna wait as well.
okay.
I have a comment after we're done.
Council comments, but not related to the motion. Okay. Motion by Charlie, seconded by Paula. Yeah, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Couple other real minor things. Thank you. There's been a request a couple times, and frankly, I keep forgetting to bring it up, so I apologize to the person making the request. I think you all have seen it. Do we want to consider, I call it a puppy mill ordinance? Is that something that we want to direct staff to spend time on? And I said I would bring it up at the meeting. I'm not making a position on it. I'm not making a motion that we do, but does anyone want to bring that and ask that that be brought up? Okay, I brought it up before the council. Last thing is real quickly, you asked me as your representative to the CML board and also as to your representative to the CML policy committee, that's called Municipal League, to bring two potential changes to the CML board as far as policy positions. One was to, great, my brain just went blank. One was to change the mill levy as it relates to vacation rentals to become commercial property versus residential property. That both the policy committee of the CML and the board determined they did not want to pursue that at this point. However, there will be several bills coming before the legislature this year dealing with that precise issue, and that was kind of the reason. The other reason that was turned down is our recommendation was that money be used for housing, and there were several municipalities who felt the money should be allowed to be used for other purposes other than housing to meet other needs they may have. The other issue was to amend the Colorado Constitution under Tabor to allow municipalities to bring before their voters whether or not we should have a real estate transfer tax. Right now, it's prohibited by Tabor. That would require a constitutional amendment. It requires a 2/3 vote of each house of the legislature to get it on the ballot. And then if it got approved, that change was approved of the Constitution, and we decided to proceed to do that, we'd have to take it to a vote of the people, of the citizens of Glenwood Springs. That measure was approved. That recommendation was made. The staff's belief was that it would not get the required 2/3 vote, but the belief of the CML board was housing is such a critical issue now, and this is a funding mechanism that this is something we should at least promote. We are looking for sustainable statewide funding for housing, and that was kind of the basis behind that. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, I would like to address one thing of just some of the comments that I heard in general, and again, to kind of echo what Carl had said. And Charlie, as far as speaking to the integrity of our city clerk, I think he works to the highest integrity and he works to the letter of the law. And I can speak to this council. None of us, to my knowledge, had any influence or any type of oversight even on the review of that petition. So any inferences made there, I really take personally to the integrity of this council. And I know for a fact that our city clerk does not have a position or a dog in the supposed fight over the airport. And I would hope as a community, this isn't a fight, but this is a community conversation. So if we're not allowed to speak to the ballot issue at all, then I'll save that for another time. But I feel like it's a straightforward question. So on to other comments. Just as an update for this board, on the property above Walmart, there's privately owned approximately 130 acres that we've had some discussions about trying to improve, and the county went in, as everyone remembers, the county put in money and also the city to get the homeless camps cleaned up and clean up that environmental disaster that was up there. So the last time we discussed the direction to move forward was to have a meeting, which we set up, Deborah set up with the county and others involved, AVLT and others involved and interested in that property. The direction was for Tom Jankowski, myself, and Tari Williams from the county to visit with the property owner and try to move this process forward to get that property more protected for the future. So we did that. And prior to that meeting, Aspen Valley Land Trust, AVLT, actually suggested that they could take an initial donation of the land if the property owner was willing. They would spend the time and the resources necessary to put it into a conservation easement with help from the owner, I believe. And then as long as the city is willing to hold a trail easement, which I think is something we have discussed before, once that conservation easement is in place on that property, then if the city would agree to holding a trail easement, we could get trails built up there and keep that property activated and cleaned up and have it become a resource for the city instead of a neglected property that becomes an environmental and a safety hazard. So I'm looking for direction from council tonight. We had two items: A, that willingness to hold trail easements on the property, and then there was a willingness for the city to manufacture some signs for no trespassing and things like that, which we'll have to find someone to put those up. But just to keep the property in the meantime, in this interim period, to keep the property, put up no trespassing signs and things like that. And I believe the county sheriff has agreed to enforce those.
I have to say, yes, signs are absolutely no problem. We have a sign shop. So.
Great, great. Do you have anything to add?
No, I was just going to follow up that I did talk to Tari Williams, county attorney, today, and kind of some of the nuts and bolts about what needs to happen ahead of kind of our further sort of legal engagement, if you will, on accepting anything or talking about what we might do. And that really has to do with some steps that the property owner has to go through with regard to queuing up so that he could make that donation to AVLT. I think that AVLT will be interested to have a conversation with the council regarding sort of if you are willing to to accept an easement and what that might mean in terms of maintenance or use or those kinds of things related to a trail easement up there, or if you want to partner with, Roaring Fork Mountain Bike Association or something like that on as far as trail creation and maintenance. But I think we're a couple of steps away from you needing to do that. And so it's really kind of back, I think, in the property owner's court, and with the help, Tari indicated today that she was, going to try to help keep that process moving along as far as connecting AVLT with the property owner and just kind of help, keep things moving so that it didn't kind of lie fallow. So with that, I don't know, other than, updating the council, making sure that you guys are still interested in moving forward. I think that's really where we're at.
Are you looking for acknowledgement that?
Yeah, just a head nod that we're still moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and I'd like to be able to ask Carl to go kind of negotiate with AVLT on behalf of the, city to negotiate at least preliminary draft agreements to bring back to council for
Yeah, I think we'd be bringing those back in probably a discussion format, maybe, a quick work session ahead of one of the upcoming meetings. I know AVLC has a meeting on
November 10th, I believe, and they wanted to have a little bit of at least reassurance from the city that we're willing to hold easements on that property. Because once it would go into conservation easement, then they would transfer it, a year or so from now to another private owner that would then hold the property with the conservation easement on it, is my understanding.
Mike, let me talk
Go ahead.
really loudly. Shelley. Is there, part of that AVLT discussion is including maintenance, off of that conservation easement? Or is there any is there any discussion?
There's really not, at this point, there's not a funding source for maintenance on any facilities that were put in up there. I mean, there is, I think, a hope by AVLC that there might be some development credits that are fungible that could be sold, that would provide some money, but that's a complete unknown at this point. So I think that's one of the things that is going to need to be a consideration as we think about this and look at some documents from AVLC is what's the funding mechanism for any maintenance on those facilities.
I'd like to see us move forward, and I'd be curious on the rest of the council.
That's all I have. If you went ahead, nod, or.
Yeah, okay. So.
Stuff that can be brought up at other times.
Actually, time is of the essence here.
No, I think that, you say that I'm wasting the people's time, but I think this council does nothing but do that.
Tony, you have the mic, go ahead.
I don't want to.
No. Oh, I thought you had your hand raised.
No.
No, Charlie's talking again.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Tony, but different issue.
You've already spoken. I object.
Council comments.
My comment on what Shelley's proposing is I'm generally okay with moving forward. I'm concerned about the cost, and so I don't know what that means. So unless staff can tell me what the costs are at this point, I'm not going to say I'm going to vote for it ultimately, but I think doing something with that piece of property is important, but I don't know that we can commit. We already have a straight parks budget, and I don't know if we can commit to more money, but depending on the cost, it's possible I would support it in the future.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
And for Shelley and I to continue to moving forward and try to maybe bring some draft documents back for council to look at.
Yeah, we all need to know that the cost is sustainable.
So I had an opportunity to kind of brainstorm with a few other counselors on the idea, independently, of course, to have the opportunity to have more branded T-shirts and sweatshirts and things for our employees. It's an opportunity for our employees to have continuity and connectivity within their employment. And we have some, but I also spoke to the chamber, and they want to also collaborate with us on that. So I'm hoping that everyone would be behind just a quick head nod of support to see if we can find an opportunity to work with them. Okay, great. And then on that note, I too want to mention that when I signed on to be a city councilor, I signed on to be a politician, and I put a hat on that said, I'll have to have thick skin, and you can go ahead and throw daggers and be critical of my decisions. But when our employees sign on, they're signing on to a job, and they do their job very dedicated, like committed, and with high integrity from my perspective. And I can be critical of that. I'm watching. That's part of my job. So when it comes to the criticism of our community development employees and from our city clerk, please refrain. You're welcome to shoot daggers at us, but they're doing a job and they're doing it well, and they work really hard.
I just want to express, number one, that I agree with the comments being made that we support our city employees and know the intensity and time they put into work here. But I do have an additional comment. I've been working on our recovery continuum with in relation to a detox center, and that is coming before the city managers with the county manager this next week.
Next week.
And I'm just going to be present there because I had been in part of so many of these conversations, and I wanted the rest of the council to know that.
Yeah, I think, I guess I'll pile on a little bit and say that Ryan Muse is a damn fine city clerk. He's diligent, he's putting in 12-hour days, he works his ass off, and our city attorney, Carl Hanlon, also worked on this. His integrity is above reproach. If you don't think that, then you've lived here for all of 15 seconds, because Carl Hanlon's an institution in this valley. Carpenter Hanlon is a leading law firm. No offense to every other law firm that's in here, by the way. But I think regarding the vote, regardless of how the vote, I'm not going to get into speaking about it, but I do think we need to hear from the people of the community, the voters and the citizens of the community, on why they supported it or not. And pretty, I think, immediately after it. I mean, if it passes, we need to find out why and what the community's vision or ideas are. I don't think we need to have a long, drawn-out, visioning session. And if it doesn't pass, then I think we need to have a conversation, find out why it didn't pass. I think this discussion's been top of mind for the last year. We've had numerous council conversations about it, many, many hours of public input, public meetings, a failed citizens petition, the current tax measure that's on the ballot, editorials, numerous letters to the editors. The community is primed to talk about it. So I think that after November 2nd, when we find out and have a little more clarity, I would like to know for myself, and I'd like to make this invitation to the rest of the counselors, that we have a listening session. And I would suggest, just because I was looking at my calendar, that November 8th, the evening of November 8th, and the morning of November 10th, it might not work out for all of us. But if that's a time where we could get together, whether it be, ideally, maybe the evening one, we could get Soapers Elementary, in the neighborhood, and November 10th, if it's in the morning, just so we can get the broadest cross-section of people possible. Maybe have it at the, community center. Just have us all kind of sit down at different tables and hear from the community. And by the community, I mean the citizens of Glenwood Springs, and find out what they like, what they didn't like, what their ideas are. I said the evening of November 8th, it's a Monday.
Isn't that already scheduled a copy of council?
Yeah, but that's only 2, so this would be noticed. And I'd like to, if all of us can participate. I think that the other thing I'd like to also do is invite the Airport Commission. We do have commissions and boards that we meet with. November 4th will be 2 days after this measure is decided, pro or con. I'd like to meet for other council to have a work session, meet with them to find out some of these issues that, we may not agree on what's needed out there. Safety issues are really important. We have some concerning things out there that they might not think we need, but as a city, we have an obligation, a fiduciary legal liability obligation to the entire city. So that's my proposal. If anybody would like to join me, I would love to have as many people as possible come show up and just have us kind of listen. Yes, that'd be my suggestion. And we could probably send out a doodle poll, but I was thinking like 7 o'clock so people could be done with dinner, just show up for an hour. I'll be there till the last cow comes home, but.
I heard 2 days.
Yes.
I heard the 4th.
The 4th for a work session. Yes.
With the Airport Commission,
Right.
and I heard the 8th with a roundtable.
And the 10th additionally for parents that have young children who can't necessarily attend.
This would be in the morning, again, would be.
Yeah.
I'm available.
And whoever can come, I guess, from council, great. If you can attend one or the other, I think more is better than not. But if I can kind of get a head nod on, generally I agree with this, even if one of those dates doesn't.
Sounds great.
Thank you. All right. All right, thanks, Tony. All right, that's all for me.
I would make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second that.
Thank you.
Been moved by Tony, seconded by myself. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion carries 6-0 because Counselor Stepp abstained.
Mr. Mayor, point of order, did staff get the direction it needed on the Shelley's proposal or no?
Yeah, absolutely, I did.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know we got it straight. All right, thank you.
Okay, item number 12, Planning and Zoning Commission appointments. I think we have one candidate, Amy Connerton. She interviewed earlier.
Make a motion then.
I'll make a motion to appoint Amy Connerton to the Planning and Zoning Commission as an alternate.
I'll second that motion.
Term in February of this next year.
Do we need to take a roll call vote on this?
I think voice vote is fine.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, next item on the agenda, where are we at here?
13.
No,
Yeah. Okay,
I really want to finish 13.
this is item number 13. This is the continuation of the annexation for the initial zoning of the 480 Donegan Drive property.
Mr. Mayor, Trent, could you just give me maybe a quick little recap where we are?
Yeah, I was actually going to.
That'd be great.
Yeah, no, that's on me. So we have had a series of, we had public comments about 6 weeks ago, I think, on this application. We took a couple of nights of public comment. You continued the item over to a special meeting. You then continued it over again on, I believe, somewhere in there, on a motion to deny on another meeting. That motion was withdrawn at the last meeting, but Councilor Stepp was unable to attend, and the council felt it critical that all 7 be seated to hear this, or actually to make the decision on this. You had also, 2 meetings ago, had provided some comments to the applicant about things that you want to see different potentially in the annexation and development. So keeping in mind this is an annexation and planned unit development zoning. I think the applicant has made some of those changes, is going to discuss those with you. You do have, and Trent is going to throw it up on the screen, I think, and go through it quickly, kind of how the application has changed from the iteration that the Planning Commission saw, which was sort of the first iteration that you saw, to today. By and large, that's smaller in scale, in terms of what's in there. There's an updated annexation agreement in the packet as well. What I would say about the annexation agreement is that really it's the reflective narrative of whatever you guys decide if this happens to move forward on an approval, and that will need to be updated before second reading of the annexation ordinance and zoning ordinance so that it is accurately reflecting what you did tonight. So that's where we're at. A couple of things for tonight. You're going to hear briefly from Trent. You're going to hear from the applicant. I know that you've had a couple of requests from the audience that they would like to speak because the application has changed. I leave it to council to make that decision as to whether you want to take additional comment or not. And with that, I'll turn it over to Trent.
Yeah, and so kind of where we left off with the last meeting, Council, good evening, by the way, Trent Hyatt with Community Development, was that, a request was made for what type of changes would be necessary to the application if the applicant were to significantly reduce the density on the site. And I did just want to circle back and kind of bring us kind of to the project as it was proposed to the Planning and Zoning Commission as compared to where it is tonight and its current rendition based on the comments that you provided to the developer. And just to discuss the total unit count, that has been reduced from 360 to 272. There was a comment made at the last meeting with a request to potentially reduce that down to 20%, which that number is very close to. But just to get into the unit breakdown of that, the townhomes in that number of the 272 has actually been increased from 20 to 40. 35 of those being required as a for-sale product, and potentially more. The multifamily apartments being proposed has been reduced from 327 down to 219, and the live-work units has remained the same at 13 units. To discuss a little bit about the attainable housing. If you remember previously, the Housing Commission had recommended that the applicant either provide 20% of the units at 100% of area median income, or 36 or 10% at 90% AMI. One of the changes proposed by the applicant to allow them to reduce the density on the property was to provide an offering of that at 80% of AMI, and that would be the 10% of the apartment units now being proposed. I will point out that our Housing Commission has stated that they support that offering, since that 80% level, between 60 and 80% is the area where the city is lacking the most in terms of our needs in the attainable housing arena. They would, in order to do that, they would offer the other half of the 10% of the apartment units, 22, at 130% of AMI. I will also point out that per the current language of the annexation agreement, you're looking at 3 of the townhome units being also deed restricted. So to discuss some of the on-site considerations that are different from the Planning and Zoning Commission's proposal, the annexation agreement today also includes energy conservation requirements, specifically the requirement for the residential uses to use the city electric system as opposed to using any compressed natural gas, and also the requirement for drought-resistant xeriscaping on the property. When we start talking about off-site improvements, there was a change here in terms of what the developer would like to propose. That would be mainly in regards to improvements along Melray, to also include a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and the intersection improvements at the Highway 6 in Donegan to the far east of the project, further east down Highway 6, to that intersection there. One of the things that was not considered previously by the Planning and Zoning Commission that is included in the annexation agreement today is direct access from this development to Highway 6 and 24. That, of course, it comes into play with conversations about purchase of the mall site. Evacuation planning and improvements, originally $40,000 was proposed to help the city with the planning and the implementation of any of that planning. That has been increased to $100,000. Also, the new proposal includes a dedication of land area for a new fire station. Of course, that would be with mall redevelopment, as well as the dedication of a public space with the mall redevelopment. One thing I just did want to point out with this agreement, the applicant has asked for a vesting period of 10 years. The general state statute is a period of 3 years, so that's something that's a little different from what is allowed per statute. But I think the applicant will tell you about some of those details. We just wanted to make sure we had an understanding of what was originally proposed versus what is on the table this evening. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I got a couple of quick, Trenton. I think you addressed things that the removal of the Melray Road 5-foot sidewalk and the intersection improvement, was that a trade-off for the reduction in the units? Is that what your understanding of where that's coming from?
Well, I think that certainly helps in terms of the developer side of things, but if you remember, there was a conversation about ownership of Melray, so it may have been difficult to make those improvements anyways, based on the fact that that is an easement and we would have had to secure the ownership.
I'm assuming that ownership of Melray has not been resolved at this point.
No, and unfortunately, that's really a county issue that we can't affect.
Second issue is direct access to Highway 6 and 24. My review, and maybe this is Carl as much as you, it talks about emergency access, not a direct access. So
if you review the latest condition list, it actually says direct access.
The annexation agreement included emergency access. The correct verbiage is direct access, not emergency.
In the annexation agreement.
Right. The annexation agreement is incorrect. The condition list is correct.
Okay. And then what's a dedication of public space with mall redevelopment? What does that mean?
you might want to ask the developer that specific
question. I know because of the uncertainty of the redevelopment of the mall property, which I will remind you would come back before you for approval at a later date. But because of that uncertainty, they did not want to get involved with a specific acreage or a specific design of that.
Okay, I'll just ask what the developer can do to address that issue. That's all, thank you.
Other questions? Yeah.
Just for clarity, and I think I've asked this before, Trent, initially somewhere along the line, I don't know if it was at the end of planning and zoning or in the very many iterations of this. Sorry, let me do this. In the many iterations, somewhere back along the line, when we went to 40 townhomes, we were going to do 8 affordable housing units for sale, and then we switched that to 10%. We brought it down to 3. Is that correct?
Well, a total of 3 that would be restricted at a sale price. I think that most of that conversation was in terms of making sure that it was a for sale product. But that number of that is, I believe, still 3 in terms of what actually we would get into our program, to our future housing program.
Was it at 8 at some point, or am I missing?
I'm trying to remember the exact reference to 8.
Yeah.
And there was an 8 number, but I can't remember exactly what that was, Paul.
Yeah, I was thinking it was about the time that Jonathan said, make them all. Thank you.
Trent, and maybe it's spelled out, but when we have those 3, 4, or 8, whatever they are, townhomes for sale, what is do we have a sales price, or is it whatever market rate is, we can sell it at, and then, or they can sell it at, and then it is now capped? Do we start there, or is it actually a discount, an affordability discount now?
I mean, the sale price is restricted to an AMI, similar to how our rent units are, but I don't think all the details.
In our code that we just recently studied, how to make.
Right, exactly. We have a whole set of housing guidelines that will apply on the first sale, so.
And kind of similar in that, it expects a certain down payment from a buyer that you traditionally have with a mortgage. But with that down payment, your monthly mortgage rate would be similar to the rental rates that we always talk about.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, Ms. Rosenberg? Or Ms. Haley? Harmer, excuse me.
Good evening, council members. Thank you for your time. I just want to go quickly over some changes to the PUD plan, since that's part of the the zoning ordinance, in response to the changes that you just heard Trent summarize. I think we should have Matthew Fitzsimmons on the Zoom to display just the revised PUD plan. Not a whole lot of changes there, but I'll go ahead and describe those real quickly. One thing we wanted to point out is that we have added a standard and a use for civic facilities in the event the fire station is located on the PUD portion of the property. We've added that as a permitted use in the event it goes on that portion of the property, and then also allocated about 14,000 square feet as the maximum for that.
Could you say that last thing again about the fire station?
Sure. So one of the conditions in the annexation agreement and for approval is dedication of an acre of land for the fire station. Whether that goes on the mall or if the mall isn't ultimately redeveloped with this property, it still has to be dedicated to the city, in which case it would go on the PUD property. So to account for that in our zoning, we've added civil facility as a permitted use and also allocated some square footage for that building as part of the PUD standards. And we also added similarly parking standards for that particular one, for that particular use, just since we have a different use now in our zoning. And then finally, we reduced the total density for residential to 25 dwelling units per acre, which originally it was proposed at, I think it was 29 dwelling units per acre. So those aspects of the zoning in the PUD have been changed to accommodate the new site plan. I just want to make sure you guys had that in the record and are seeing that, since it'll be related to one of the ordinances you may be considering this evening. And then I will hand it over to Barry to talk more about the details, unless anyone has questions about the PUD plan that I can answer.
maybe it's a question for you, maybe it's a question for Mr. Rosenberg, but how much who's ever running the slideshow goes back a little bit, to the pretty one. There we go. You know, there's been a conversation about open space and so I see like two kind of lawn areas. I know we're not in site plan mode yet, and this is just a representation, but, you know, it's a representation I think they're possibly making decisions on. How many acres, or not acres, but what portion of an acre is those two lawn areas?
I'm not sure on the lawn areas. I think the pocket parks that are called out, so that's kind of on the north along Donegan, and then the tot lot that's by Building D. I think those are each about 5,000 square feet, but Barry may know more about the internal green space area, and I'll let him answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. If I took a moment, we've obviously been working at this for a while, and as you can see, I think from where we started, which was originally ultimately proposed as 400 units to what we have today, has been a result of meetings with multiple people, feedback from the city. I think as a company that's been around for over 60 years, long-term thinkers, I think we've tried, and hopefully what we've been trying to do is balancing a project that is feasible for us and really trying to address a lot of the comments that we've heard from the community. And I just want to, and I think also the Demoses, who have been here for a very long time, they've obviously owned this property for quite a while, had lots of different opportunities to do this. I think as they have spoken in the past about it, feeling that the reason they wanted to work with us was the fact that we are long-term thinkers. And we have been in this valley for over 40 years, and my family's lived here for over 20 years. I do want to talk about some of the changes that were made, and I think it's important. We've dropped the number of residential from the last meeting that we had from 292 units, which does include the live-work units, not the townhouses, to 232 units, which is actually a 20% drop. I think it's important also to note that including the townhouses, we are now at 22 units per acre. So just to give you some perspective, the project that was recently approved, which is the Mountain View, is 40 units on 1.3 acres, which is actually a little over 30 units per acre. The Canyons is also over 30 units per acre. The Meadows, it's hard to determine because you have a lot of cross-sharing of parking. If you look at the actual land owned by the apartments, they're actually all over 30 units per acre. So it might be a little distorted because there is shared parking in that, so I just want to clarify that. I do think that in doing what we've done and in lowering the overall density, we have reduced some of the traffic impact, which I think also mitigates part of the thing as far as not doing the work along Melray or the work on Highway 6. There is a traffic study, updated traffic study in there. We've also, I think, which we've heard loud and clear, is affordable housing. If you look at your regional housing study, your two biggest areas of need in affordable housing actually is in the 60 to 80% range, and also the 120 to 130 range. And so we've again tried to balance that, and we've had conversations with Hannah, who works with your housing authority, and so I think they've clearly been in support of this project. Also, there's been a lot of comments about smart growth, and I just want to comment a little bit about smart growth. We do a lot of work with ULI, which is the Urban Land Institute. And if you look at this project and you look at a lot of things that what people talk about, this project is using the existing infrastructure that's already been brought up to the site. We're creating diversified types of housing, including affordable housing. We're being good stewards of the natural resources. We're going with all electric, which is renewable energy. We're proposing to develop basically net zero landscaping. Water, which I know is a huge issue, and the biggest part of your water, which basically soars during the summer, is people watering their lawns. And that's when you've had restrictions and others. We are going to be 100% watering our public and common areas with the water that we have already on the site with our current water rights, which, by the way, we are giving to the city, which would also be able to be used for other things within the city as well, so not just within our project. And again, we're also improving the existing infrastructure, specifically Donegan Road. There's been a lot of important public comments. that we've really tried to address along the way. And there still seems to be a lot of information, sometimes, a little distorted information. I think it's important to understand in your most current census, the average person living in a unit is about 2.5 in the city of Glenwood. So when you look at the number of units here and you hear numbers of 1,200 or more, it doesn't make any sense to us. And we manage quite a lot of properties, and we absolutely restrict the number of people that are living in our units. We expect to have less than 700 people living in this property. Fire evacuation, which is extremely important, it's been brought up. I think there's been a whole thing, safety first. And if you look at it, providing a new fire station, which is desperately needed, it's not only, it's part of your 2020 strategy, and providing an additional entrance onto, through our project and through the mall that we have the rights to do, whether we own the mall or not, that we're bringing to the table as well, which we think hopefully helps work with this problem. And I think, as you know, there has been at least a preliminary part on that fire evacuation. I think it was attached to your plan, and we have been working very closely. And as was pointed out, we are contributing or prepared to contribute $100,000, which is needed in order to bring in outside resources to help further develop that plan and bring that to fruition. There's been a lot of conversation about the comp plan. It is kind of a guiding document. And it's interesting to note that if you read through it, a lot of these comp plans that are developed are expected to look out over 20 years and to be modified along the way. Prior to the 2011 comp plan, your comp plan was not updated for over 13 years. So, the issues, quite frankly, that are brought up in that comp plan are very consistent with your 2020 strategic plans, which is affordable housing, people living and working in Glenwood Springs, the redevelopment of the mall, and a new fire station. I think the only issue that we've really brought up that's come to light, and a very important one, that was not part of your comp plan, which is why, even if you read the comp plan, it talks about not rewriting it, but updating it as things change over time, is it did not talk about fire evacuation. And it was not really brought up in 2011, which again, is something that we have tried to address here. I think the current mall owner, who actually made this comment, has summed it up best in his comments, that having the mall be part of an overall master plan will make the mall development more viable and attractive to retail and commercial tenants. As we all know, having one piece of property in the city and one piece of property in the county, this cannot occur without an annexation. Our current agreement does call very specifically for us, first order of business is to put together a master plan, which does need to be approved by this, by the council. As leaders in this community, I think you need to do what is best for the community, which is not always popular. There is a reason that your entire professional staff supports this project. So I ask you as we look forward, and if I could, there was a comment made about the public space. What we've tried to do, again, we haven't fully developed the master plan. We don't know whether this property is going to get annexed or not. What we have addressed in there was the idea, which is where we believe the larger public space belongs, is basically a transition between this residential project and the redevelopment of the mall, and as part of a master plan. So what we have done is we've addressed the fact that that was part of that master plan, that we would be putting together a larger public space that we think really would connect well with those two pieces. And that is that's how we've kind of addressed it. And since we've not fully addressed exactly where the fire station's going, we've not fully addressed where the park would be going, it's hard for us to say it's got to be here, it's got to be there. But we are very cognizant of the issue and the need to do that. I think as far as the common areas that we have, as mentioned, there's really three. Each of the two, the one on the very top along Dunnigan is about 5,000 square feet. The one that's next to the Live Work project is probably a little bit larger than that. And then there's a third kind of oval that divides the two buildings in the back, which may have to be rethought as we think about that master plan, which again is why those two buildings cannot be developed, or at least there's a timeline in which we can develop them if we do not have a master plan. But it's highly incentivizing us to develop a master plan to make sure that this project integrates with the redevelopment of the mall. I don't know if we have any other further questions for me.
Well, because it's not spelled out, it's not spelled out specifically in the annexation agreement. It is spelled out an acre for the fire station, but it doesn't spell out specifically the tot lot, the pocket park, and the lawn area of how large that is. So do you have, from this representation, do you have kind of a guess about what that would be, and could we put that in the annexation agreement?
I found out the answer. So the central areas, those two lawn areas, they're just under an acre as contemplated right now. And then there's the kind of the green area along the south, which is new in this site plan, and that adds another third of an acre or so. So collectively between those central lawns and then down south, that's about 1.3 acres. And then, as we mentioned, the pocket park.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
My question follows with the players is, what's your contemplation of what, I think we need a park in this area, so one of my concerns that I haven't seen addressed yet is what are you contemplating, assuming you go ahead with the mall, what are you contemplating that you would have for lack of a better term, a public park?
Well, I think one of the things, which is why I see it as a connection to the mall itself, is that part of what we've tried to do in some of our preliminary thinking is to create kind of a main street, if you will, that would connect from the mall to this. I think really we're looking at knocking the current mall down and completely redeveloping, I think, as we've talked about before. I would imagine that as you create a main street where you have restaurants and you have commerce, having that along a public park as part of it is, I think, a big part of what we would see. If you ask me, that's how I contemplate that public park being created. As far as size and length and all of that, we have not further designed it.
The question.
I would just like to follow up on that question. So it seems, along with what Charlie's thinking, if there's nothing in the annexation plan to kind of speak to that public space issue, is there something we can put in there just to add assurance for the city that we have some minimum, or we're negotiating in good faith, or how that could work?
I think we put in there, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, there was a good faith effort in there, and I don't have any problem suggesting that we do that. Until we have a plan, it's hard to commit to something as far as what that would be. And I think that there is also clearly the plan as proposed is to develop a master plan, and it does limit what we can do until that is developed.
I think I'm going to ask Haley, because I think she was looking through to find the specific provision.
Sorry, Carl, I can't.
Sorry. As I recall, I think the way we tried to draft that was a meaningful public space in the master site plan. And my thought on doing that was that it's hard to define what fits best with the total development as far as that public space. Is it something like the Willits green space with a splash pad and things like that? Is it a more formal park? I don't know, but I'll let Haley address if she can find it there in the annexation agreement handy. I have to apologize. I'm having some technical issues with my computer. I have a new one on my desk that they just set up today, but wasn't ready to confirm in tonight. But
I think that was, it's actually one of the conditions of approval that the annexation agreement be amended to include a reference to the master plan submittal be provided with a meaningful public open space area. So that's in one of the conditions, or recommended conditions in the recommended motion.
In the recommended motion? Okay.
Where are the conditions?
Number 9.
Number 9, there we go.
Oh, thank you. I know I'd read it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, because I didn't see it in the annexation.
Real quick, sorry. So who decides what's meaningful?
That would be you when you approve or not a site plan.
Okay.
It's a tough word for a developer or for you guys, either one, but probably more for the developer, because you guys really are the ones, when you look at that site plan, as the planning commission does, and they say, this is meaningful or this is not.
Okay. So just to, not to be obtuse, but just to take it to the extreme, if we were to say, man, we want 5 acres, and that's the only thing that's meaningful to me,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, you know, all of these things are, there's a concept of reasonableness in the interpretation that Charlie would recognize, or Tony as an attorney. So I think it's, you know, I mean, I think what we were struggling with is not knowing exactly what that site plan might look like, but wanting to try to ensure that it includes a component that is incredibly important to the community.
You define for me what a future master plan is. I'm sorry.
It's, the future.
Wait, let me finish the question. I apologize. I waited for the microphone. Is that both properties together?
Right, that's what we're contemplating, that the condition relates to the assumption that there will be a master site plan, which is referenced in condition 8, recommended condition 8. The subject property shall be developed pursuant to a master plan per section 070 on. That master plan is a term of art in the code that would be the entire parcel, including the mall parcel, would be master plan together underneath that provision, which applies to over a certain acreage in Trent, or somebody will have to remind me what the acreage is. No, of what qualifies for master plan, 5 acres. It has to be more than 5 acres.
My question is then, if the developer doesn't go forward with the purchase of the mall,
that condition isn't going to have any meaning, because it's
we would
contemplated as being part of all of it, which is, I think, why Jonathan was asking what the total space, open space is internal to the development.
So would we then be precluded from requiring a park space if they only went forward with the current, the one that's?
I don't know that you would be precluded from asking for it. It wouldn't be a requirement in the annexation agreement.
Okay, that's my question.
And I think, I mean, are you stretching or? Okay, sorry.
If I touch a, no.
Okay.
Can I ask a procedural question? Because I think we've discussed this long enough and it's time to vote. Are we at the point where, because I can't remember, where Mr. Willman has withdrawn his motion to deny?
We're at a clean slate.
Right, so someone has to, at some point tonight from this dais, hopefully soon, make a motion either to approve or deny this annexation.
They do, or to work through the condition list. The third option there is to make, if people want to work through the condition list, I suggested you get through that first, because it gets messy on a main motion.
But like deck chairs on the Titanic, that may not be that important. I would make a motion to deny this application at this point.
Could you give me 1 second to answer that one question, and you can.
Well, you can make the motion, I don't care.
Okay. It's my understanding that we would need to appropriate a zoning designation. In doing so, our municipal code already has certain zone districts that have designations for how much public space and open space we would need, right?
Well, you're approving a PUD, which is the zoning.
Sure, okay.
So that defines all of those things in the PUD. So the answer is yes, but you're doing a PUD, so the PUD guide control.
Sure, it takes precedence, but we do have some references to other areas.
Yeah, that have reference points. Yeah, you would, absolutely.
Again, I would make a motion to deny ordinance 0920, consideration of annexation.
Sorry, real quick, Tony, do you mind, just for the record?
Oh, I just thought I was talking loudly enough.
They won't pick it up for the people watching online.
We need to fix this problem.
What's the Long Beach?
I could talk to Buttigieg. I would like to make a motion to deny, and Carl, tell me if this is correct, ordinance 0920, consideration of annexation, the initial zoning rezoning of 15818 acres of commercial district and planned unit development, PUD district, at 214 Center Drive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's okay?
It's 08, not 09 for the annexation.
Oh, that's what I said.
Yeah. I thought he said ordinance 2021, or.
0920.
08/20/21, sorry.
That's what I meant. That's not what I said.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion by Tony, seconded by Paula. Further conversation?
Once again, I want to say that the work that the developers have done on this and the plan they put in front of us I just applaud you, but I still feel there are a number of things that we need to work on, and we need time to work on it. I feel like there's a number of things that we need to work on as a city, and we need time to work on it, and we don't have the funding to do some of this stuff. One is what the infrastructure cost will be to us in the long run. I look at an acre of land for a fire station, and when I projected out what we're looking for on the value of the parkland at 5.181 acres for 1.369 million, and divide that to an acre, that comes to less than $300,000 in compensation for donating this piece of land. Of course, we need that land. I understand that. But what is the infrastructure cost to us in the long run? What is the cost to us for our police department in adding the additional police that we need and the infrastructure they need to take care of this extra population in this community? What is the problem that we're going to encounter with the increased traffic in this area? Even at roughly 675 people in this new community, that's still a number of cars that are going to be on that on those roadways. And I looked at some photos this last week where we had another traffic accident and traffic was backed up. So I just feel like this is a great project, and this is going to get developed, but we need to fix some of these things that we have right now. Is that going to take us a year? Is that going to take us 3 years? I don't know, but I just feel like we are putting the cart before the horse a bit, and I'd like to find us taking care of some of that. I was encouraged by these discussions of open space today. I think that's really important to this side of town. We don't have enough open space, and some of the information that the developers have passed to us today are encouraging, but I just feel we need more time to take care of some of these problems that we're facing.
Charlie.
So I'm not going to support this motion, even though I made the similar motion a couple of meetings ago.
Either, Charlie.
I'm sorry. I'm looking down at my notes, so I apologize. I'm not going to support this motion, although I made a similar motion last time we actually had a motion on this. And the reason I'm not, and I think it's important I indicate that, is one of the concerns I had was density. The density's been brought down to 272. I think that solves those concerns. We've added the for sale units, which I know was there, but it wasn't the level it is now. Adding, make sure I get this right, 35 for sale units in this community is real critical. We don't have any for sale units coming down in the market. The issues of water I've never been concerned about before. That was not my issue. The other issue I had some concern about was the evacuation. We do have an evacuation plan in a general sense that's in the packet about how we're going to do this, and it looks like it's probably the best we're going to be able to get in this constrained community we have. The developer's putting money toward that. The only concern I still have, and if we get to a motion to approve, I will probably be talking about that, is for park space, because I think we need park space even if the mall doesn't get developed. So that'll be something I'll be looking for when we move to approve if we get to that level if this motion fails.
And I also will not be supporting this motion just because I feel like we've worked very hard on this project. We've come a long way with the developer, and it's bringing a lot of improvements to Glenwood Springs. To speak to some of the issues that have been brought up in the comments, there are restrictions in the annexation agreement that the project cannot move forward and be constructed until, for example, that emergency planning and evacuation routes have been planned out and constructed, and a water tank installed and other improvements such as that. So I cannot support that at this time. I'd like to see us move the next step. And I'll also look for a motion that we can negotiate on if this does not pass.
All right, Ryan, let's call the question.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem Whirlman.
No.
Counselor Kell,
No.
Mayor Goodis,
No.
Counselor Hershey,
Yes.
Counselor Russo.
Yes.
Counselor Davis,
No.
Counselor Stepp.
Yes.
Motion fails, 4-3.
Okay, I guess I'll just be looking, maybe before we throw out another motion, I'd like to talk about conditions of items that, people would like to see.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, as a point of order, I was just threatened with a recall by Mr. Hershey. He just said, I'm done, and there's gonna be recall. I don't appreciate those comments, even though, hold on a sec, they were a sidebar comment.
Real quick, the correct way to do this is to address the chair. Counselor Willman has the floor right now. If you're not addressing the chair as a regular order as spelled out by the code of the City of Glenwood Springs, I would ask you please refrain from speaking.
banging the gavel at me, Mr. Mayor.
I did not, I gavelled everybody down, and please.
Like you're a child.
Charlie, please finish.
Oh,
I'd move for a 5-minute recess.
Granted, let's go. Come back in 5 minutes. Sorry, public. I'm as embarrassed as you are. Okay.
Can't hear me. This is a very emotional issue, and if my motion had passed, I was going to say this, and then I did the exact opposite, which is, there are passions on both sides. So Mr. Willem and I have worked out our differences, and I apologize.
I accept and I agree, we worked it out. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, go ahead, Shelley. What I would like to do now is talk about, since that motion failed, about other conditions, not that a motion ultimately might pass, but if it were to be something that any of us could live with, what are some of the conditions that the rest of us, would potentially have? So, Shelley, go ahead.
I had some conditions just to see in the annex. Sure. I was reading I think it's dated as red lines from September 29th, 2021. So it was a redlined version of the annexation draft. And so, well, I'll skip that first one. So the first thing I had was on the affordable housing stipulation. It was redlined to be 10% at 80% AMI and 10% at 130 AMI. I would like to see that 10% at 130 go to 10% at 120, just because that is in compliance with our affordable housing code and our guidelines. They kind of cut off at 120. So I'd like to see us keep that within those affordable guidelines. So just changing that second 10% to 120 from 130. And then in section 10G, dealing with the access to Highway 6, I believe that's been addressed possibly as a condition, but just to strike that word emergency from the access to Highway 6 so that it's a fully open access. And then in section 11, there's a line of text that I feel should be put back into the document, and it concerns, there's just some wording in there about site planning and phasing.
Shelley, what was the section again?
Which one?
The section you're working on right now. I missed the...
Oh, section 11. Yep. And it has to do with limitations on getting the master planning process going and approved. And there was a line in there that said the master plan has to be submitted within 6 months of execution, and approved by the city within 18 months. That 6 months was stricken out. So and that 18 months for the city approval was left in. So I would like to see some type of timeframe deadline for the applicant to submit the master plan, whether it's 6 months or 8 months or.
I think what I would suggest is somewhere between 6 and 8 months, only because thank you. From a procedural standpoint, I'd like to give the city close to a year to be reviewing that, or at least 10 months to be reviewing that, because it's going to be a big site plan review. So if we back up 10 months, I'd suggest putting back in 8 months. Submit within 8 so that we have 10 months, that's 10 months for the city to get through a review.
And I'm fine with that, to give the applicant 8 months to get their master plan submitted. And then the final one was section 12. State statute gives 3 years of vesting. Section 12, I believe, calls out for a 10-year vesting period. I would propose that be dropped down to 5 years. I think that gives them an additional 2, just due to the size and complexity of the project. But I'm not real comfortable going to a 10-year vesting.
So if you say 5 years to vest? 5
years vested for this. Yeah, as opposed to 10. That's all I have.
Thank you. Go ahead, Trevor.
And just for clarity, Shelley, that would be in addition to the 9 conditions proposed in the October 7th condition list.
Yes, and there's a little bit of overlap there on that emergency.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So what I'm going to, and I agree with the things that Shelley's asked for, so what I'm going to ask, one is clarification, Carl, in 7D, it says any future development proposal shall include direct access to Highway 6.
Yes.
My understanding is that direct access is part of this proposal, or that the development proposal for this parcel.
It is. There is an access easement that goes along the edge of the mall and then down to Highway 6. So you can have the direct access whether the mall property redevelops or not, which is why Trent drafted the condition that way, and that would then be made consistent with what.
So my question is, condition 7D, is there'll be direct access as part of the approval of this PUD annexation?
Yes.
Okay. My second comment is, paragraph 9 of the suggested conditions, and when I'm talking about this for the record, these are the ones dated October 7, 2021, 9, future meaningful public open space. My view is that that should be a dedication of 1 acre of open space, a minimum, and that should be dedicated to parkland. And if they don't develop the other parcel, the mall parcel, they still need to provide it in this approval we're giving tonight. And they can take away some of their other open space, but that should be dedicated to the city. And certainly I assume they would get credit as they would under the open space for parkland for that. But I think we need to have a total of 2 acres, 1 for the fire station, 1 for a public park, which I think we really need. So that's the change that I would suggest that we add in addition to what Shelley indicated.
Can you say the last one again?
So 1 acre of parkland in addition to 1 acre of fire station, it would be in paragraph 9 of the conditions.
So I think what Charlie's trying to say is that there are 2 total acres of public land dedication, 1 to parks, 1 to fire station, regardless of whether the mall site develops.
Okay, great,
And
thank you.
Can I clarify on that? Would that be in addition to the green space that's shown on the plan?
I don't care if it's in addition or in exchange for. Yes.
So real quick, just as a point of order, the applicant said that there's 1.3 acres already.
But that's private to the development, it's not public access as I understand it. Maybe I'm misunderstanding that. I want an acre of land that we can develop at some time in the future. We probably don't have the money to do it now, but sometime in the future, a park for this area of the community. I think we need a park in West Glenwood. And an acre is small. I got some numbers. Sullivan, which is out in West Glenwood, is 4.3 acres. Centennial, which is our little pocket.
I'm sorry, thank you. Sullivan Park, which is out in West Glenwood Park, is 4.3 acres. Centennial's 0.23. Axtell, which is we often call Chamber of Commerce's half acre. I would like to see some area of activation. I don't want it just to be a passive park, but that's something we can argue about later. But I think we need at least an acre of land to make it reasonable.
And you just mentioned that we develop, but they've already included an acre and a third almost of green space that they're developing. So is that your intent? Yes.
Real quick, maybe I can help out here.
Yeah.
Is that lawn area that you're showing and the tot lot, is that public use or would that be restricted? Could you please step up? Sorry, no problem.
The 2 pocket lots, if you will, would be open to the public. The space that would be by the swimming pool, which I think might be part of that, would not be dedicated to the public. And then the oval-shaped space that's there would be dedicated to the public, which is we would see that probably changing as we put together a master plan. So
that helps me. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my goal is to make sure there's an acre. It's open to the public, and we can develop it, we want further into an activated park.
So I just got confused with that. So with the acre, I mean, we already have a commitment for.
I think in fairness, and I don't know the exact square footage of it, of the 1.3, Pro Tem Mayor is correct. Not all of that would be open to the public. I think what I heard, and we would just obviously look at it overall, is he's saying, I don't really care what you have as far as public space that's private. I want at least an acre that's public. So in fairness to what he is asking, I don't know if the full 1.3, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, that was not all intended to be open to the public. If you take out the part that was not, I don't know exactly how many acres that is. So we'd have to go back and look at
So
that.
I think Charlie's condition is that there be an acre of open space / parkland available and open to the public on either the site plan that we have, the PUD plan that we have seen, or as part of the overall master site plan.
And the overall master site plan would also include
The mall, right. Right, so you're looking at what you saw in the PUD plan is almost an acre currently, but there would be an acre of usable space available to the public.
Yep.
If they choose not to go through the mall, they still have to give us an acre in the development we're approving, the PUD we're approving.
So just to close that up, if it was a condition, does this summarize it? Because I think this is a key point for folks. A total outdoor public space of 2 acres with up to 1 acre being dedicated for a potential fire station. Does that?
The balance be dedicated to.
Nope.
Say it again.
A total public outdoor, they've already committed an acre for the fire station. So a total outdoor public space of 2 acres with up to an additional, up to 1 of those acres being dedicated for a potential fire station.
Sure, that was.
Can I ask a question about that though? Is it a one contiguous acre?
I think that's a site plan question.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I think that it's.
An annexation?
Yeah, just throw in contiguous with, so on your up to 1 acre being available for the fire station and the balance to be contiguous.
Up to 1 contiguous acre, up to 1.
Well, and it already is not, because there's 2 pocket parks in there.
Yeah, but as long as they're I mean, I guess in my mind, contiguous would be, is there something that makes them connected so that people can flow from one to the other? I think what Councilor Russo is concerned about is that you do like, it's like when we work at snow storage, and you've got like 10 square feet over here and 20 over there and 10 over there, and that's not what we want to see.
Okay.
I have an appreciation for the desire to have more public space, but it's so difficult, of course, for us to get up here and define these things to that minute detail when we in fact do not have a site plan. I don't know that it takes an acre of land to build a fire station.
Up to, that's why I put up to.
Yeah, but, so maybe it's 3/4 of an acre and another 1/4 acre then gets dedicated to public use in a different fashion. I don't want to be restricted to having, to lose that acre, to use it or lose it for a fire station is what I'm saying.
And that's, I think, why, Jonathan suggested up to 1 acre. And I guess in my mind,
The bar that is getting set there is that there's 2 acres that is available for public space. And so then as we go through the site plan process, we can start thinking about how best to use that 2 acres of public space.
Right. And that could be spread into the mall area as well.
Right, and I think that's what has been discussed, is that if the mall does redevelop with this, that public space may actually be more the connection between the 2.
Right. We've worked up here on, if I could just have a minute here, we've worked for years on trying to figure out how to redevelop the mall. For all the years I've been on council, which seems like a lot at this point. And, and I travel quite a bit and I see a lot of modern developments. And San Antonio, I was just in Austin, Texas, and Orlando, Florida, and you go into these redeveloped areas, these developed areas for restaurants and bars and public spaces, and always in the center of that, there's quite a sufficient public space where kids play while the mom and dad's sitting in the outdoor dining area, so a lot of this we have to take on kind of not given fact or exactly what the minute detail of this, but our faith in that this developer is going to actually do something meaningful for this area. And fortunately, I think we've got a developer that has that same vision. And a lot of communities would search long and hard and not find that. I'm going to say that I'm disappointed in the density. I thought 330 units was reasonable. I think the more dense that development becomes, the better opportunity is to have a meaningful mall redevelopment. The more vitality you can bring into that area, the better that redevelopment's going to be. I'd love to walk out of my house at night and go, hey, you want to go downtown, or you want to go out, you know, where this new area is? That's going to be a great place to hang out. You know, if I was making a motion, and I may, but I'd be talking about the 330. We also gave up a lot of affordable housing. We talked, you guys, I don't talk so much about affordable housing, but you guys have all been beating the drum for affordable housing for ever since you've been sitting up here. And now you're wanting to crank back affordable housing and lose that opportunity for this community. This is the number one thing that this community needs is housing. It needs not only housing for all aspects of life, doctors and lawyers and nurses, but it needs that affordable, it needs that attainable housing, and you guys are giving it away.
Sure.
Thanks.
So on that note, I agree with you. We do need housing, and my push has been we need housing for families. So one of the things that I'd like to see here, that there's a commitment that those apartments have at least 30% of those apartments at 2 bedrooms or more. We're building a number of 1-bedroom and studios throughout this town, and that does not take care of our families. So
I actually think, and I'll have to get the specific numbers from these guys, but if I remember right, in the reduction in density, most of the studios went away.
We did. We actually, there were some policies, they did go away. I have, I think, the breakdown, but it is roughly about 50% 1-bedrooms, and then the other 50% is 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms. And I don't have the exact, I don't have it in front of me. I thought I did. But it's fairly significant, yeah. And again, that was in response to a lot of what we've been hearing.
okay, thank you so much. That's really important, I think, for this community. And then the other thing that hasn't really been addressed, it's been in some of our conversations, but the other problem that we have in this town is a child care facility. And I know we've talked about you can't do it in the PUD, but if we could look at it as the larger master plan, that will become part of that.
So, and I think either the developer or maybe even Floyd can address that, because you guys reserve a space in the current commercial.
There's 2 things. One, we have allowed it, if you look at the language we put in there, we would love nothing more than to have it. I think part of what's happening right now, and John or Floyd can address, they have this current facility in their space now who cannot find employees to operate it, and therefore just physically can't operate it. We've actually specifically, if you look at that plan, there, you do need a certain outdoor space. If you notice in the property that we're buying, there is a triangle that we're not buying. It's been specifically left out so that there could be an opportunity for exactly what you're describing with an outdoor space as part of the space that the Demos is currently owned today.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that is accounted for.
I can add to that too. John Demos, we've provided a preschool space for 35 years. The first 30 years, it was New Creation Preschool. And for the last 5, it was the Montessori school. She decided to take a position at RE2, so the Montessori has shut down. That occurred at the end of July. Essentially what we've done over all those years is provide a subsidized space. It's difficult financially to make a preschool work. And we had 2 individuals together that were going to partner to come in and take over the Montessori in a different name. It wasn't going to be the Montessori school, but it was going to be a preschool. But what they found is they had a lot of interest with parents that had children under 3 years old, which required a higher concentration of teachers. And so the economics just didn't work for them. I asked, would it work in the future? And they really didn't think that it would. So it's just a really tough situation that we're in. I don't know if somebody in the private sector, if it's not nonprofit, I don't know if it's going to work. So that's kind of where we're at this point.
And on that note, is there something at the city level that we can find some grant funding or something to help along this line, or is that really part of this conversation?
I mean, it's not really part of this conversation, but I think as John was talking, I was thinking in my agenda. That's really something that I think we need to sit down and talk about.
Okay.
Such a critical need in the community, and we have the space that is kind of available for it and set up for it. And so I think we should we should sit down and have a conversation about how can we make that work.
Okay.
I'd love to have that conversation.
Okay.
One change that I did make on the PUD plan, was to remove, childcare, facilities from the list of prohibited uses. So it would be allowed in the PUD with the conditional use permit, same as, other zoning areas. So that did change between, last time and now.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Haley. And then my last one is, and I had mentioned this earlier, is we are going to see infrastructure costs. That's part of annexing a place, and I'm just wondering if, I appreciate the proposal of devoting acreage to the fire station, and I'm trying to think in my mind as quickly as I can, how do we do that on the police department side? Because we're having the same type of problem. It's going to cost, additional police cars, it's going to cost additional policemen. And I'm looking at, is that something that we could add, saying we want 3 police cars added to this, to kind of mitigate some of that impact that we are going to be carrying as a city?
Not to talk to whether we can add that to it or not. I mean, the biggest problem we have in the police department is filling the open positions we already have.
And I understand that, so we're still going to be short.
It's not a matter of, money for positioning or using vehicles. It's, how do we convince police officers they want to live here for what we pay when housing is so expensive?
Maybe we can instigate then some of these units are for police housing. There's an idea.
There's enormous amount of taxis coming out of the development like that.
Right, so we can use that towards, yeah. Okay, well, long-term infrastructure is what my concern is that, yes, we're gonna get, you guys are very gracious in what you're offering, but in the long run, it's us carrying the bill 10, 15, 20 years out.
I haven't had a chance to speak on this evening. I don't really have to. I think everyone knows where I stand. And, ultimately, having been on planning and zoning, I commend the developers for hearing the feedback and making so many changes. Ultimately, I think that if planning and zoning heard the application today, I think they would have a different opinion. Because I think that you made so many of the requests that were at the front end of this application. The amenities coming to the community will definitely improve my neighborhood in some ways. And in some other ways, it will challenge us. And we will have to make adaptations, and I encourage you to work with us, just like I encourage the community to work with the new members of our community when the project is completed. We united, we stand. If this does move forward, we are a community, and I have heard so much frustration, and it's rightfully so. This is a lot of change. It's a privately held property that has felt like open space for a really long time, and it's never been open space. It's been a parcel owned by a family who chose not to develop it until now. And so if we can all grow together, and there will be bumps, but if this is approved, which the last vote kind of indicates that maybe it's going in that direction, I would just encourage the developer to continue to work with the community to make this as painless as possible.
Jonathan, I think something
I just have a quick question.
Jonathan, or maybe, Mr. City Attorney, this isn't something we have to address tonight, but I had a concern when we were talking about direct access to US 6, and I was just looking at my notes. I don't know how we can talk about direct access to US 6 without having a conversation with CDOT. And then I think the other problem you run into with that direct access to US 6, then you start to affect that emergency thing. So maybe that's just something that can be explored in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, that direct access actually runs through the current mall property and actually has access currently through the mall property. So that's, I believe, a currently existing one. If the mall didn't redevelop, And then those access permits would obviously be triggered based on percentage of change at those points is usually how CDOT does that.
Okay, I just,
Yeah, no, I appreciate the flagging it as an issue, because you're absolutely right.
All right, I have a whole ton of comments. I'm just gonna keep it to one. I've heard, Councilor Davis suggest that he liked the idea of the vitality of 330 that it was. I've heard Councilor, Willman say that he liked the density at the 272 that was proposed. Split it down the middle is 301. If we just did a nice round 300, is that something that the people who are going to potentially vote for it would agree to?
I could agree with that.
What'd you say, did you?
I could agree.
I wouldn't be thrilled, but if that got this, if I got a park space, I'd probably okay with that.
That's something you could?
You're suggesting 30 more units than even the developer would agree to.
Yes.
And you're, so, to me,
Hold on.
yeah.
I would like to hear from Councilor Davis if he would accept that compromise.
I would make that motion.
Okay.
I want to be really clear, procedurally, that if you make that motion and it fails, we are done. Yeah.
Well, I have 4 head nods that there's 4 people that would agree to the 300. So, Steve, do you have a motion to make?
Well, we've been talking about this a long time, and I would say, before I make a motion, that I feel really bad that we have continued to move the goalpost over and over and over on this application. It's just not the way business ought to be done in my mind. And with that, it's probably going to move a little more here. But I do have a motion. I move to reverse the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the request for an annexation with the, as outlined in Ordinance 2021-08, a 15.818 acre parcel into the municipal limits of the city of Glenwood Springs with the following additions: a total count of 300 units, a total outdoor public space of 2 acres with up to 1 contiguous acre being dedicated for a potential fire station, vesting rights of no more than 5 years, a deed restriction of 2% real estate transfer assessment on the second transfer of the 4 sale units that are not designated affordable, an affordable housing mix of 10% of the units at 80% AMI and 10% of the units at 120% AMI, a master plan submitted within 8 months, and with the recommended findings and conditions listed on pages 1 and 2 of the city council list of motions of October 7th, 2021.
Can I ask for clarification?
I'll try to answer that.
The wording on the 2 acres public space.
Yeah, I think
I think was a little bit.
yeah, I think it was, I think what, Councilor Davis maybe meant to say was 2 acres of public open space, at least 1 contiguous acre, of parkland or open space.
Right.
Rather than fire station.
That was my intent.
So I think that was,
I will second that motion.
Right.
Okay. There's been a motion by Councilor Davis, a second by Councilor Kaup. Any conversations on that motion? Sorry.
I'm disappointed in you guys. I'm disappointed that the developer, that, you know, ultimately, none of you live out there. This is not your PUD. This is not your part of town. The traffic every day will not impact you the way that it will the community who has shown up regularly. And all along, this has been in negotiation. And so now we have the developer who has willingly reduced it down to a certain level that maybe was a little more amicable, and you guys are bumping it. I'm disappointed. I think that was poor form, and I think that 30 units, you know, that's probably 45 more cars every day. I think that everything stands, that I still think that, you know, we do need affordable housing. We do need a place for police officers and teachers and everyone to live. But I don't think that renting a 2-bedroom condo or apartment, not even a condo because they can't buy it, is everyone's American dream in this community. And I think when we make decisions like this, we are not putting our community members in the same respect level. I think we need, I'm disappointed in how this is going to play out.
I feel like annexation is probably one of the biggest issues that we will face as city council people. And it should be a long, drawn-out conversation between us and the community. And for us to just kind of go, it should have gone faster, we should have been there quick, so we're going to give back what we've taken a long time to get to, is really disappointing. I have heard this community say they understand that this property would probably be developed, and I think they've worked really hard to express their opinions. I think I have spent a lot of time, and you all have spent a lot of time to kind of look at these issues to determine, you know, what are the right moves for us? What do we need to do the best thing we can on this parcel of land that is coming into our hands? And I can't vote for something that we've struggled for so long to get to a good point through annexation discussions, and then turn around and say, okay, well, none of that mattered. Let's go back to where we were.
Brian, let's call the question.
Councilor Stepp.
No.
Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilman. Mayor Goder.
Yes.
Councilor Hershey.
No.
Councilor Carroll.
Yes.
Councilor Wuster. Motion passes 4-3.
All right, now we need a motion for the PUD as well. Would like to make that motion.
We have a list of motions.
Well, let's take a 3-minute break, recess right now while folks clear out before we.
Make a motion.
Okay, if you want to make a motion, go ahead.
Yep. Let me get to it. Is it on ordinance B? Okay. Do I need to?
Yeah, go ahead.
I move to reverse the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission and approve the request for an initial zoning and rezoning as outlined in Ordinance 20-2109 of 3.533 acres to commercial district, and the 12.285 acres to planned unit development, BUD district, with the recommended findings and conditions listed on page 3 of the City Council list of motions from
Yeah, October 7th, not September.
October 7th, 2021. Do I need to refer to the recommendations that we just made?
Only to the extent that the PUD be conformed to the motion and conditions on the annexation ordinance.
Okay, that the PUD conform to the motions and recommendations on the annexation agreement, with the recommended findings and conditions as shown. Do I need to go through each one? As shown in this October 21st or October 7th council list of motions in our packet. Can I?
Motion by Counselor Cobb, seconded by Counselor, Willman. Further comments?
Can I make comments that I did not get to
Yes.
on the last? Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to.
I just wanted to speak overall to the approval of this project and this project moving forward, because I know it has been very painful and it's been, it's a huge decision for the community. And it's been a long process. And the developer, I think the developer and the city, we've both come to a point where it's going to be, in my opinion, it's going to be a good vision and a good moving forward for the city in the direction that's in alliance with our comp plan, and it's in alliance with the strategic goals of council. So I'm sorry to hear about the disappointment, but I believe at our last meeting, there was a request to reduce the density, and even that was not apparently enough to get some of our councilors on board with the vote. So to me today, going back to the 300 units, that adds 6 more affordable housing units to this development. And for me, that's a win for Glenwood Springs. It's more opportunity for our workers to live here. And there's been a lot of talk during this whole process about sustainability, but I can say from a sustainable standpoint, multifamily homes take up less land, they use less water, materials, and other resources than any other form of housing. Townhomes and apartments house people in a much more sustainable way. They reduce the materials needed to house families and workers, they reduce the water use for households, they reduce the energy use, and they reduce the footprint on the land. We are a very landlocked and tight-landed city, and we have a choice to either grow internally and grow up and more dense, or we spread out and impact the land around us much more. People talk about open space. I think that wild open space outside of our urban boundary is most important to our city way of life and our future going forward. We will not address the issues of climate change and drought by forcing our working families to live in distant towns and make long commutes. We maintain our sense of community and character by building places for our community to live and to thrive. This proposal started out with more than 410 apartments. We've now worked as a community. We've listened to the input on emergency evacuation, the need for a fire station, the need for zero escaping and smart landscaping, the need for public space, and other needs of our community. There will be approximately 60 units that will meet the requirements of an affordable to our workforce. And these will house families and new additions to our community with an opportunity to live here. So this is the first step in the process. And to me, it was a really important step to get this property annexed into the city so that the city can work with the developer going forward to see this be the best development that we can have for Glenwood Springs. And I feel like it's important to the future. And to me, it was a vote for the future of Glenwood as a whole city, but particularly of West Glenwood, and seeing them all be redeveloped. So I look forward to working with this developer and the Demos family and staff going forward to make this the best project we can for the city.
Very brief comment. Appreciate Charlie's comments. My concession on the density was probably does something I would like to have done, and I would hope as you look at the master development, you consider that additional number of units in your total units for the master development.
All right, we have a motion by Counselor Kopp, a second by Counselor Willman. Ryan, let's call the question.
Counselor Lusso.
No.
Counselor Stepp.
No.
Counselor Hershey. No. Counselor Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Woman.
Yes.
Mayor Gurtis.
Yes.
Counselor Kell.
Yes.
Passes 4-3.
Okay.
Another little quick break or not?
Yeah, I would appreciate a break.
Yeah, 5 minutes, come back at 8:33. All right, item number 14 is our budget hearing.
Item number 14.
Budget hearing.
Is the,
Yes.
is, so, procedurally, what we thought we would do, is get through, since you guys, the room's a lot emptier now. There was some discussion that there would be a fair amount of comments, but we structured this so that the public hearing would be last, so that you guys could work through these other couple of issues related to the budget and then open the public hearing. Official comments on the budget after you had clarified these other couple of issues. Does that make sense?
And I think I was going to go through. Okay. Essentially, there are 4 outstanding issues that we feel like we need direction on and would appreciate a vote. The first one is the split in the tourism tax. There's talk about 85-15, 80-20, so that is the first issue. And you guys are gonna work on this, yes?
Can we just stare at you blankly or like?
No, well, yes, you can, but.
Good.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we direct staff to split the gross tourism revenue, 85 to the tourism fund, 15% would be retained for 7.5% for FAB grants, the other 7.5% for other matters within the promotion of dealing with the impacts of tourism in the community.
Second.
So just to be clear, I think for us and the public, this is 85-15 on the entirety of it. Because I believe the direction given in the last work session was 85-15 after the first 7.5%. Is that, but that's not this, that's the other one.
That was the discussion of the work session. I'm making a motion.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make clear what the motion was for everybody, so we're not gonna be.
Mr. Mayor, that was my understanding.
Okay, okay. Motion by Counselor Wilman, seconded by Counselor Hershey. Further conversation?
So, yeah, I need a little more clarification because you're kind of surprised me with that. I thought it was tourism, I thought FAB came off and then it was an 85-15 split.
That was the discussion at the work session. I don't agree with that. I think it takes too much money away from the tourism budget, and I don't agree with that concept.
I'm sorry, thank you. I don't agree with that concept. And if you look at the numbers, either Steve's or mine, and Steve's numbers are more accurate than mine. I had some mathematical errors in the spreadsheet I sent out. That keeps the tourism budget at the levels about what it is now, and I think that's important. I'm concerned in the long run, which is the thing I expressed in the work session, that we don't know what's going to happen yet next summer. And I think that we need to keep up the marketing of this community. Tourism drives our economy. The multiplier factor that comes from that is huge. And so cutting it any more than that is something I can't support. The 15% allows the city to keep 7.5 for the gate grants, and 7.5, my view, should be used for tourism or tourism-related impacts, such as cleaning the downtown, fixing the elevators, those kind of things. I think that gives us some money for that. That has support of both the chamber and the tourism board, and I think it makes overall sense. So that's why I'm suggesting that.
Okay, can I have Richard?
I guess my
There you go. There you go. There you go. Good.
I guess my concern is in the future, and maybe it's a discussion for the future, but, there's been some conversation about having an opportunity to increase these taxes on tourism, and I worry that I'm not sure I want 7.5% to always go to FAB, regardless of what the monetary amount is that comes in the door, and maybe we should consider some kind of a cap on FABs, 7.5. And like I say, maybe that's a conversation for, you know, when we do increase, if we did increase, if the voters voted to increase that tax. But I just thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, can I come real
Yeah,
quick?
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I probably won't be supporting the motion because, you know, my understanding from the work session, and again, I know that's not the motion, but, you know, that was that first 7.5% just comes off the top, and it always has. So if should this motion fail, I'll make another motion that we do the same 85-15 split, but after the 7.5% comes off. I think we have a lot of needs, and I think I potentially maybe disagree with you a little bit, Councilor Davis, because if we're able to bring in $3 million someday out of this 2.5% lodging tax, then I think, you know, those FAB grants and the fireworks and the 4th of July celebration should all share in that largest. So I don't have a problem necessarily capping it at a certain dollar amount. I mean, I want longer, better, and earlier fireworks in the future. Thank you for that.
And I guess I don't have a strong feeling either way how we split the tax up, so I'll listen to the rest of the conversation. But just to speak to Councilor Davis's comment, in my mind, if we do move forward with changes to the accommodations tax on the ballot next year, that would be a new conversation on how that funding gets split up, separate from this.
Just respond, then Steve might respond to both of us. That'd be great, because when at the work session that we talked about this, I thought we shouldn't even be talking about this. And in responding to Jonathan's, 7.5 at the top hasn't been there. Started out 80-20. It then changed to the 7.5, and the rest of it went to the tourism budget. That's the history of the money and the use of the money. So when you say that it's 7.5's always been there, right now the only portion that goes is the 7.5 to the FAB grant. So that's the history of it.
And then Ingrid gets it. Yeah. And I do believe that we need desperately help for tourist impacts, right? And the more tourism you have, the more impacts you have. Doesn't necessarily mean that FAB should get more money for those programs, but we certainly have more impacts, and that's going to cost more money in the future to resolve that.
I'm going to support this motion because ultimately I feel as though historically we've always just taken the 7.5% off. This gives us an additional 7.5 and allows us to apply it towards tourism impact. As far as the 7.5 being reduced for FAB at some point in the future, the way this is set up and the way that it works well is when we do a percentage, it allows for increases of costs over time. This sets that precedent and allows us to grow without being behind, which water rate study was a great example. If we had just had a water rate that said every year we increase this much, we would have kept ahead of that. This allows for that. This is also in alignment. This is the tourism budget saying, okay, take 7.5%. We recognize that if we get to a certain threshold, which we historically have, we still have enough to function in our budget without having it be a detriment to our ability to market our community, which as a strong tourism economy, we need that tool. It also gives us 7.5% to appropriate to keeping bathrooms open all winter and making sure that the downtown core stays cleaner. But I don't want it to just turn into a slush fund. I want it to, through some work with staff and whomever needs to be involved in that dialogue, we identify where this 7.5%, where it goes to, and how it's going to get used, so it doesn't just get eaten up on other things.
Okay. All right, you go ahead.
You're checking now.
No, I'm good.
No, you did. Steve, you can have 3 bites of the apple before Paul gets 1.
No, I took her bite.
Oh,
Oh.
who wants to bite? I didn't realize.
It's your turn to speak, Paula.
Unfortunately, I wasn't in the work discussion and at the previous meeting that I was in that we discussed the tourism fund as, I had mentioned that it was important to me that at least $1 million was in the tourism fund for advertising. I agree with Charlie that we have to be able to tell our message, and we have to be able to tell those messages in times when we're in special needs, like we were during COVID. So looking at this and having gone through it and listening to this discussion, I will support this because I do believe that gets us to the point of supporting our tourism board, but also taking care of the needs that we have in town.
I'm sorry, you were a bit muffled. Did you say you will support this?
I will support this.
Okay, I was just counting votes, so.
So nobody heard what I said, but that.
I heard it, which is amazing. I heard everything.
Ryan, let's call the question.
It'll be in the minute. Somebody will know. Somebody will be in the minute.
Counselor Hershey.
Yes.
Counselor Couch.
Yes.
Counselor Russo.
Yes.
Counselor Davis.
I'm gonna say yes because Ingrid supports it.
Counselor Seth. Mayor Pro Tem Wellman.
Yes.
Mayor Durbin.
I'm going to say yes because Counselor Davis supports it. See the influence you have, Ingrid?
See, yeah.
Trickles down.
Trickle down.
Thank you, Lisa.
I don't think they're sucking up. They may be making fun. I think it's a fine line.
Okay, great, that's even better.
All right. Tourism management study.
Okay. The background on this is, I believe during work session, it was thrown out that there is $100,000 set aside to do a tourist management study. This would be different than relying on your tourism management board. It would be something that, that council, I think, would focus on to determine what they want tourism management to look like for the city.
Who does that? There are some consulting groups out there that are working on this specific issue, and it's become kind of a thing. I was talking to somebody who works with the Colorado Tourism Office. I had no idea about this stuff, but they mentioned that a lot of communities, Telluride, Vail, a lot of other of the mountain communities are really trying to focus in and use it as a way to understand where they are in that continuum of being discovered, managing, whether you're in this category of kind of being discovered, whether you're managing the tourism, or if you're in crisis mode of trying to address the impacts, and sort of what the community would like to see and how you use those tools, and it's just really focused on that. And it seems like it's becoming a more critical issue. Like I said, I know that Jonathan didn't get an opportunity to go to CAST, but I was talking to one of my other managers who's at the CAST meeting in Park City. He said that was like one of the topics of conversation more globally as well with resort communities. So for whatever it's worth.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it was actually discussed quite a bit at the Restart Tourism work session that was held, was that last Friday? Seems like a long time ago, Tuesday. So, yeah, it's definitely a topic, but 100,000 seems like a lot. Is that grant money or?
I think this was something that it was suggested, and we're now asking if you want to do it. I don't have a plan for it.
Does that come out of 15% or the 85?
I think that is what I'm asking you guys.
Seems like we could get a study like that for half that or less.
It's up to when we do an RFP process, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It is not something I have looked into in any way, shape, or form.
You will what?
I've not looked into it in any way, shape, or form.
I love these maps put there.
I know.
So my comment is there is, and Lisa can do this better than I'm going to be able to do it, but I think I understand it. There's currently, through a state grant, a study throughout the valley on the impact of tourism throughout the valley, which will have specific references to the impact on Glenwood Springs. That study, as I understand it, will be completed in November, December of this year. my view is we should get that first. And then if we feel we need to, we can still come back and amend the budget, decide where we're gonna spend, get the money, and go from there. But I'd rather see what we can get for free and then go from there rather than spend the money now.
And I would say, I agree. I think we absolutely need to wait, and that's why it's for 2022 budget, but we need to wait to see the results of what that study is. But I think what's being contemplated is not a survey of the Valley and Glenwood Springs specific. It is, how do we take those results and then apply it to what we want to see here in Glenwood Springs? So what kind of advertising, what areas, how much digital? That's not going to tell us that. It's just going to say, but I think we probably save money because the survey, potentially gets done by another organization that has already been done. So I also think 100,000 is a lot, but I think it's a placeholder, and I think we get a better scope of work in RFP, which will come back to us after we see the results of this community-wide, valley-wide regional study. So I think if people want it to be 75 or feel like that's even too high of a placeholder, that's fine. But I want to see how we implement strategies.
So, and maybe it ends up being 50, I don't know. My only question is, would the chamber, the tourism board support this study? Charlie?
My understanding is they think that the current study is going to answer these questions. If not, I think, I can't speak for them, but I think in my meetings with both the chamber and the tourism management board, we got renamed tonight. The tourism management board would be willing to look at engaging in a further study. And then we can talk about how it could be funded. Does it come out of the tourism budget? Does it come out of this 15%? Then we can look at it more. I don't think we needed the budget to say that we're going to do it at this point.
I was going to do something. I agree with Charlie. We have unanswered questions, and it feels like we should answer some of those questions before we spend the money or reserve the money. We can always go back and look at finding this funding, especially if we're looking at a lower amount. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse a little bit here.
I'd like to see the study done, but not at 10% of the tourism budget after we take their hit. So I think that if we want to do it, then we can do it from the 7.5% this year, and that's a further study. I don't want to make that decision tonight because I think there's some variables we don't know.
Tell me. I look back, I don't see.
I'm way at the end and everyone forgets.
We don't.
Apparently not. I'm not an expert, Mr. Mayor, on tourism. I like to travel, but I don't know a lot about it. So I like to defer to Angie and Lisa and the people and the board and experts frankly, Mr. Davis, who know a lot about this. So I tend to agree with Ingrid and Paula and Charlie that I think the study is going to answer this. I don't see the rush to do this now. So I'm opposed to this, spending this now. Thank you.
Put in the budget.
Right, we're putting in the budget now, today.
Ryan, has anybody made a motion?
Do we need one?
I made a motion. Yeah.
I would like a vote on all of these just for.
Okay.
What was your motion? The motion.
I don't think you did. That's why you can't remember. I will make a motion that we, at this time, do not include it in the budget, the study, but we contemplate after we get the original study back, bringing it back before council at that time to see if further action is needed. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Circulator bus.
Okay, the original budget had a $50,000 circulator bus study coming out of the bus tax. I believe at the last work session, it was indicated to us that we should potentially take $25,000 from the DDA budget and $25,000 from the tourism budget instead. So I would like to know how council wants us to do that via vote.
So I'll just start off. I'm going to go a little Ingrid on this one. That's made a good.
Is that a new term?
Let's do this for the rest of the evening. The tension is a little high. We refrain from referencing each other in motions and, okay? Yes, thank you. That would be a high level of respect.
Well, I cannot support a circulator bus in any way, shape, or form, because even though I'm the one, I think I might have been the one that suggests that there's a different split. Spending $50,000 to study a circulator bus downtown for a tourist before a third of the population of our community in South Glenwood, because I'm sticking up for my ward, is what I'm doing, I think is ass backwards. I think that until we spend $50,000 finding out how we can do first and last mile, until we spend $50,000 considering TDM, until we consider $50,000 on how do we get at least a minivan out to South Glenwood to provide some kind of public transportation for a third of our population, I think this is crazy. And then the more I think about it, the more upset I get that a third of our population doesn't have access to public transportation. And, quite honestly, half of the population in Glenwood Springs as a total doesn't have easy access even to Ride Glenwood, even when it does service parts of their area, because they have to walk different areas. I mean, we don't have service for Mountain Valley. We don't have service for, the elderly people that live in Glenwood Park, like Mr. Merritt and myself. So I think that I think this is too early to put in the budget. Myself, that's how I feel. If we wanted to spend $50,000 to talk about how we could get first and last mile or TDM to benefit the entire community of residents, or how we could serve the residents that have no access to public transportation, that's a conversation I would love to put. I'd put $50,000 on any of those conversations, but a tourism circulator bus downtown that benefits just the tourists when we have citizens without it is something that I have a really hard time supporting. Okay.
Yeah, that's a motion. I agree with you completely, but my only caveat is if it's funded, if it comes out of tourism, I wouldn't want that to be funded out of our bus tax or our street tax or any other general or fund of the city. But if it comes out of tourism funding and they want to help us keep tourist vehicles out of our downtown and parked at their hotels, and I'm not against that, but otherwise I agree.
Just real quickly, first of all, this says in the DDA boundaries in the staff report, and I don't think it ever was my intent, and I'm a promoter of the circulator bus. I think it needs to be outside the boundaries to be effective and be useful. I agree 100% with what you say, though, Jonathan. I think we need to figure out how do we serve the rest of the community. There's South Glenwood, there's other parts of Glenwood as well that aren't being served, and that's certainly a concern to me. The only advantage I see to this concept of the study, not the funding of it, is can we reduce the need for paid parking and or other parking downtown? Because one of my thoughts of this, if we get these people in their cars, in the bus, to come downtown or to go to North Glenwood after we get that developed, rather than having them drive down, we may reduce the need for parking. That's what I see to be the positive of a circulator, and I don't know if that's right or not. It just makes sense to me, but I don't know if it's right, I don't remember if I'm the one that got the study put in the budget or not, but never knowing I am, so that's probably where I was cut. Okay. Oh, that's my concept behind it. I will speak up for the DDA. I was at their meeting earlier this week. They were caught off guard that you were asking to take $25,000 out of their budget without consulting them.
You agreed.
I don't believe I did. If I did, I thought, I don't remember agreeing to that, but Jonathan, I could be wrong. My memory could be bad. I'm old. But I'm just telling you the DDA was concerned. They felt, I'm not even sure they wouldn't support it. They just felt, hey, wait a minute, now you're telling us it's a mandate, given asking us whether we're willing to do this or not from our budget. So in any event, if the vote goes this way, you don't have to worry about it because it's not going to happen.
So maybe this is kind of one of those tourist management study kind of deals where we don't put it in the budget right now. We give DDA an opportunity to talk about it, discuss it, see what they want to do about it, ask for recommendations from the Tourism Promotion Board if that's a beneficial use of what.
Management board.
Did I say that? It's going to take a while. So for that reason, I'll make a motion that we not include that in the budget at this time until such time we can get recommendations from the appropriate advisory boards that we're being contemplated to ask.
Can I include Transportation Commission in that?
I would amend my first to include Transportation Commission, Counselor Davis.
Second.
Okay, but
You also amended to include this ad hoc committee that the inspection tax and the lodging tax, because I think that's part of that question.
circulator bus?
Yeah, that was my question, which I didn't get a chance to get. That was how,
That's still a question we have to talk about.
right, is that one of the questions that committee is looking at?
No,
Needing a downtown circulator?
No.
It's not.
it's out of the scope of what they're looking
Okay,
at.
all right, that was my question. Thank you, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No.
Motion and second.
First by myself, seconded by Counselor Davis. Any other comments? The motion is that we don't include the circulator bus at this time in the budget, but that we wait for recommendations from Tourism Management Board, Transportation Commission, and the DDA before it comes back to us for another conversation. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Public hearing, D.
Okay, well, I think we presented the budget to you at the last meeting. Now is time for public comment on it. So there's no like dog and pony show from us. But before we open it up to public comment, I just wanted to make sure, get a little more clarification on the 7.5% that is not going to FAB, but you guys want us not to do anything yet, is how about we just put it in a reserve and we come back and talk about that later? Does that work?
I think the motion was is to be used for tourism, related or impact expenses. What that means, I have no idea, but
I figured we should come back with what that,
I think so too.
if you're comfortable, you understand we want that, put it in the budget, the reserve is fine.
let's start with the reserve and go from there. Okay, and with that, open the public hearing.
All right, public hearing. Anybody from the public like to comment on the budget?
Lisa Langer, 902 Mount Circus Drive. Thank you.
You still have 2 minutes and 57 seconds.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, we'll bring it back for council comments. Oh, I'm so sorry. You weren't quick on the draw. I thought you were just,
I came for something. Hi. What's the correct format that I'm supposed to do?
you have 3 minutes. Give me your name, if you live in the city of Glenwood Springs and are a resident or not, and not.
So look at this, a timer.
And how are you doing?
Well, hi, I'm Lori Welch. I live at 828 Red Valley Drive. I am a West Glenwood person, and I am here to just thank everybody for all the work that they've done, but I also just really wanted to talk about West Glenwood development. So I am just going to.
Sorry, we can't talk about this. This is just explicit to.
This is all budget related also.
Okay, as long as you keep it budget related.
Okay, I'll put some numbers in there. There have been multiple large condo developments over the last couple of years, approved over the last 3 years. I can think of the law.
Lori, ma'am.
This is all money.
No.
It is.
I'm not gonna allow this.
This is all money coming to our community.
If there's something specific you want to relay, is a public comment on the budget. But if not, I will give you one more opportunity, then I'm gonna ask you to sit down.
I guess I just don't understand how this isn't related to the budget.
Because you're not talking about the budget adoption. You were talking about a West Glenwood mall development, which we're not.
That's why I asked the specifics. I'm not familiar with what the budget adoption process is.
Okay, well then, thank you very much, but we can't take comment right now on an item that we've already taken public comment on, that we said we would not take public comment on.
I guess I'm confused as to why public can't speak in a
Because that's.
forum in front of the public.
It's not an appropriate time. The public comment time has already passed. I'm sorry.
I just heard public comment.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. Please have a seat, ma'am. We're not going to take any more comments.
Oh, you're fine. No worries.
Thank you. All right. Is there any other public comment about specifically the budget? All right, we'll bring it back for council comments or questions. Go ahead, Councilor Kopp.
Okay, I have a couple of comments and questions just for that, for the final budget as reflected here, and I'll do questions first. I had a question on the $400,000 transfer in the tobacco tax fund to the general fund, and how is that being spent?
I need some help on that, Steve. I'm gonna need some help on that.
No, it was more for 2021.
Yeah, it's just a transfer to the general fund to help defray the cost of, for police officers and public safety and whatever else is in that question. So it's not set aside separately, it's just a transfer.
Okay, will that be dropping down to zero, or will it continue at a certain level?
The plan is to, keep pushing it down as much as we can. So we came down this year from 750 to 400.
Okay, just curious where that was going. Is there funding for Summer of Music? Does that used to come out of?
That's FAB.
Is it FAB?
I think they typically get money from FAB every year.
Get a FAB grant, okay. In the fleet fund, I had another question on that. There are line items, I think it's revenue coming into the fleet fund, and it's called overhead, and there's like 5 of them, and it adds up to about $715,000. Can you just explain to me?
Yeah, that's a good question. We probably should have talked about that a little bit more. So there are 3 different ways we get money into the fleet fund. One is we transfer in to buy vehicles and equipment.
Right.
One is that the fleet fund charges out money to each of our general fund and other, water, wastewater, electric departments for service.
Okay.
What's happened though in the fleet fund is that they own all this equipment, and that equipment has to be depreciated. So we don't really have a revenue stream to cover that depreciation. So we transfer money in from the various funds based on how much equipment they're responsible for the fleet owning, so that we can shore the fleet fund up and they don't go underwater.
Okay, but the depreciation is not actually a cash outlay.
Exactly.
It's
right, but we still need to have that funding coming in. We spend the cash, and then that cash depreciates down, right?
Okay.
So it just...
Were there conversations?
Well, we just don't generate enough money between transferring it to buy vehicles and charging services.
Okay.
It doesn't cover the fleet fund.
So it's covering that.
Exactly.
That's overhead, so maybe it's part of kind of maintenance and.
Yeah, it's just overhead for the fund.
Okay, thank you very much, Steve. And then I'd just like to say I'm really glad to see that the landfill fund is close to being in the black. I think it's just 50,000 under. And then, I have that one. So overall, just to comment on the public budget document. For the public version of the budget, I would really like to see just the transparency and understanding for the public of the budget, that we have a workable table of contents in the PDF, so you can actually navigate to the page. Otherwise, yeah, one of those click-throughs. And then also, there were some good examples in 2017 and 2018, where there's like a letter from the city management, kind of speaking to how the budget supports the strategic goals of the city, and also it kind of gives some graphic representations of how the money breaks down, really simple, so it makes it really clear for the public, because it's pretty grueling to, as you know, go through all of that. So just making it a little more user-friendly and understanding, I think it would really work to the benefit of the public and transparency. And again, good examples from 2017 and 2018. Maybe it doesn't need to go to that extent, but I don't know if anybody else would support that kind of thing.
That is something Steve typically puts together a little bit later. Okay. We have gotten the budget award, which is really kind of cool because of those things. It's just not something he does
at this stage. Okay, so that just comes in later.
Right.
That would be great. Okay.
Any other questions?
Comments? I have one quick change, or a request, I should say. So I am the Root Eye Water and Power Authority Council Liaison, and historically our contribution was $5,500. But we've had that, it's been like 20 years or something that it's been that amount. And we have had some expenses increase over that time. And so we are hoping to increase everyone's contribution to $6,050. So that's a $550 increase. If everyone would be supportive of that, that would be our annual increase. Okay, great. So I'll make a motion? Okay, great. So we'll amend the RWAPA contribution from $5,500 to $6,050.
I'll second that. Moved by Ingrid, seconded by myself, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Carries unanimously. Any other?
What's the next step?
We have, still have comments?
I'm going to ask that when we look for the budget approval on November 5, the airport budget be addressed separately, because if it stays.
I probably can't hear you.
Pardon?
I cannot hear you.
Take the, no. Take the mask off. I don't have one on. I'm going to ask that the airport budget be voted on separately from the rest of the budget, so that I can express my vote on the airport budget, which will be separate from the rest of the budget. If that's in there, I don't know if we can do that, Carl, from a technical standpoint.
You know, we've done all kinds of things in the past. If it is, you know, and I guess it's the will of council. I mean, you guys have been fair and had a lot of opportunities to express your concerns over various aspects of the budget. Historically, this council, at least, has always taken a position that if there's something that in the budget that you just cannot support, that means that you're probably not going to support the budget. And I know, I think Councilor Hershey has done that a couple of times. And so pulling things out for a line item vote has not been the practice of this council, but it's up to council if they want to.
Fine with it?
You mean the way it is?
No, I'm fine with it. If you want to pull that out to have a conversation about that.
I want that vote to be separate.
Well, if that allows you to vote for the overall budget, to express that, to say, I do not vote for this part of the budget, but I will yet continue to vote for the whole thing, then that's why I support it.
Which is sort of the same thing, though, right? You're still gonna be supporting the entire budget. I know.
It's the will of council. whatever you guys want.
I'm looking for other opinions.
I'm assuming you're thinking this because we're gonna have a vote immediately before the vote goes out immediately before it. It's gonna impact possibly what that budget is, and you're just concerned. So my question is, we can revise the budget after we approve it, right?
Absolutely. I don't know that that's actually why Charlie wants to speak to this budget.
Okay.
Right.
I don't agree with the airport budget. I do not agree putting capital projects money in to support the airport. I cannot vote for that.
Okay.
If I have to vote, I'll vote against the budget, which I do not like doing because, the budget is something I really spend a lot of time and energy on, and I want to support the budget. I appreciate all the hard work of staff, but I can't support that one aspect of the budget, and I won't vote against the budget as part of it. If I have to vote against the budget, I'll vote against it, and I'll express my reason for it, so.
I just have a procedural question, like, if we do that, like, do we need to have two different items where there's just like the airport budget and then the whole budget?
Well, no, I mean, that gets into, and we can discuss it, we don't need to have this conversation tonight. Functionally, though, you need to vote on the whole.
Fine, I just thought I raised a procedural issue. Thank you. I don't want to get more time tonight.
All right, so we're back on November 5.
So that's 2 weeks.
4. 2. 4. November 4.
Yeah, November 4th.
If I keep throwing out numbers, I'll eventually. I'm just saying.
All right,
So that's our last.
that's it. That's the hearing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you. Good.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Steve.
Thank you.
Yvette.
Thanks, Yvette.
You guys worked your butt off on this.
Thank you, Yvette.
All right, lodging and attraction tax ad hoc committee revised.
Sumner, would you come up and join us?
Where's the staff?
Okay. Yes, Sumner, and you're stuck with me because I limited this to staff that only truly has to be here.
All right.
And I won't do a good job of this as candidate, but, a couple of meetings ago, you guys, approved an outline for a housing kind of ad hoc committee. We took that to both the Housing Commission, and then also got input from Sumner, and they think it's just too big to be manageable in the timeline in which you guys want it delivered.
I think too big of the issues are too big.
The committee is too big. You know, I have run a 16-member advisory committee before. It is not easy, and it is not quick. So, I mean, I think Sumner has some things he would like to say, and then we'll see how you guys feel.
Well, I don't have a lot. Do you have a copy of the revised proposal? Does council have that in their packet?
Yes, it's one of these happening.
The long and short of it, for some strange reason, I was approached and asked if I would chair this thing. And I said I might, but I did look at the original proposal, and to me, given what I think council wants is input and support to come up with a viable way to consider accommodations and or attractions tax for you to decide whether to proceed with, but for us to come up with a reasonable dollar amount, a reasonable rationale, a reasonable way to do it and support. The original concept was too broad to get done in an efficient manner and almost too wide in scope. So I looked at it and I said, well, I think I can pull this off if we narrow it all and still meet the desires of council. So that's what's led to this proposal that I'm willing to lead should you give the okay.
I believe staff has made a recommendation that we, in addition, include one member of the restaurant industry.
It came out of our housing commission meeting, and we had a willing, well, I don't know who, I think I know who may be selected, but yes, and just for clarification, my objective isn't to limit this to the input of 8 people. Those people will then be going out to their people and getting information and feedback and bringing it back to us. But I think keeping the timeline tight and the numbers tight will let us get this done in an efficient manner.
The suggested composition is the first attachment is Chairperson Sumner, representative from the accommodations industry, a representative from the attraction industry, technical funding housing experts from either TAPA or CCHA, a finance banker representative, a Latinx community representative, and a chamber/community and mood representative, and then it sounds like also a restaurant.
The food industry restaurant, yeah.
Okay. I know this is not what you guys voted on, so we wanted to bring it back to you.
You know, and I think.
I also don't know how to force the board because they don't want to do.
Right, and I think, you know, at least from my perspective as the author of that original composition, you know, what we had heard is we don't know what the issue is. We don't know who needs this. We don't know what kind of, you know, housing, what kind of units. Is it for sale? Is it rental? Is it, you know, does it have to be within the city limits, 81601? So there's a lot of those questions. And I kind of see this as more interested in how to pass a tax, which is important on how we address that. But I think my initial one was the feedback that we kept getting from public comment was we don't know what the problem is. And so I don't know that, you know, I guess if this is the will of council to change it to this, but I would like, I think staff's recommendation of a restaurant representative, but I would suggest one more, just one more. And that would be a representative from the school district that they have done this. They have 60-some units. They know what it's like to use public financing to do this. So to not include them, whether we are just now morphing it, talking about a tax and how to get money, or we actually are talking as well about how to, where it goes, what kind of programs, who's eligible. That was more where I was going, because that's what I felt I heard from public feedback. But I think if we include those 2 additional ones, restaurant industry person, as well as a representative from the school district, I would love somebody from Mountain Family, but that's fine. I don't want to do that to you.
No, but I would encourage, Mr. Mayor, that we take note of what you said, but not necessarily seat somebody from the school district. We will reach out to them because they're successful, but they also have a ton on their plate, and we will come to you. I mean, there will be a rationale for what is needed, but bear in mind, we're looking potentially. Should this come to fruition and should the council approve it, we're looking potentially at a 20-year source of funding for affordable and workforce housing. I don't think there's going to be much need to demonstrate the need. I mean, it's come up through your own survey. It's come up in every community on the Western Slope right now is dealing with this. And so there'll be a rationale. I think where we'll get, and we'll have to wrestle with how much and from where. But also we'll be talking about, and this may be a little less comfortable for a sitting council. If we're talking about a 20, theoretically, maybe a 20-year process, the committee, I believe, and I don't want to speak for the committee because it's not here yet, will definitely put parameters about defining how it can be used and where it can be used. But it's going to be, I think, a pretty broad list rather than a finite list because you don't know what kind of opportunities are going to come up in the future. So there'll be a laundry list, if you will, of here are the ways these funds, should they be approved, can be used. But anyway, back to your question, John, I would still like to keep this thing small. We will talk to the school district because they've been successful. We will talk to other communities. We'll be talking to the one employer who's done this in town. So the conversation will be broad. I'd like to keep the committee as small as possible.
First of all, Sumner, thank you for your work on this. I appreciate it. My comments are kind of twofold. One is that I don't agree with the purpose of the taxes being a dedicated source of funding for increased inventory availability of affordable workforce housing only. When this issue came up in the council and there was potential to take this to a vote, the concerns I had were twofold. One is that we were talking about adding an attraction tax, so we're talking about increasing the accommodation tax without bringing the players who would be impacted by those taxes into the conversation. The second thing is that I felt these funds should be used primarily for housing, but I also think that we need to look at other things that we need to use these funds for. For instance, a downtown circulator. For instance, doing maintenance in the downtown area. Now, we did some other stuff today to help with that concept, but it may not be enough money because there's roughly $100,000 and maintenance is $300,000. I don't think we're going to get the tourism, the accommodation and or the attraction industry behind this without looking at those issues. I know one of the major players will not support the attraction tax. I don't believe will support the attraction tax unless the circulator is considered as part of that. And that could be a critical component. So I disagree. This is a change from what I thought we were looking toward, and I can't support the current purpose of this committee. I think the makeup of the committee I don't have an issue with.
The way I'd address that, Mr. Charlie, would be, again, it's my understanding that more important than any tourist attractions right now, whether it be a circulator, whether it be picking up trash, is housing. Now, whether the city, and that'd be you, whether the city decides to move, you've already picked up several items of a housing toolbox in the last couple of years. Whether we're too late, whether it's enough is a different issue, but I'm still understanding that it was my understanding when this came to me is housing is more important probably than almost any other issue in the city. And it says workforce and affordable. So there's a broad range, and we're not going to define that either. I think that'll get defined in the future. In answer to your question, I understand it's going to be, there's some dicey politics here in terms of attractions tax and maybe even increasing the accommodations tax. My feeling is, Charlie, that we should, until we get our input, we shouldn't put anything other than housing on the table initially. If it comes through those committees that says, look, you want a viable, supportable source of funding that's coming from the attractions and accommodations industry, then just like you guys debated tonight, we need a little piece of this. In that case, we would come to you with a recommendation that in order to get this done, we need a piece. If for some reason that doesn't come up, then it would be for housing. That was my understanding. It wasn't we're gonna try and do housing and tourism related. That wasn't presented to me.
That's the way that I supported and I'm the one that suggested creating the ad hoc committee. The composition got changed and things from that. I can work with the composition because you got some of the major players. I would like to have more people on too, but I work with 7 people. I don't want to get beyond 7 people. I tend to agree with you. I disagree. I think if you just say this is housing, you're going to turn off the accommodation and or the attraction representatives fairly quickly because they're going to say, what's in it for me? This is a consideration we have to look at. We do not want to set this up for failure if we're going to put this forward. We have to make sure we're meeting.
So guys, great. I think we're starting to debate the purpose of this, but the agenda item is the makeup. I just want to focus our conversations, the makeup of this committee. We can go back and forth on circulator or this, or if the pool will support it, a hashtag they won't. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think we really just need to focus on what this makeup is. If you don't want to support it, Councilor Willman, I appreciate that. I think we've heard your statement, but I don't want to get into a back and forth on all the things it could be or couldn't be, who might not support it. Like, let's leave that to the committee.
I appreciate that going back and forth. This is not the purpose of this committee.
Can I make a suggestion? We could add one line to those goals, Sumner, and that would just be, you know, I agree with the toolbox and everything else you're talking about and the makeup of the condition, but in reference to what Charlie's speaking to, we could add one line to that, which is for this group to also make a recommendation on a percentage breakdown, similar to what we just did with the tourism tax, with the accommodations tax. You know, does 90% go to housing and 10% could go to other offset tourism impacts, or, you know, just to make a recommendation on that.
But do you want to do it by?
And focus on the housing issue, but there's a set aside to offset other impacts.
Yeah, and if you want to phrase it as consider a percentage or consider revenue sharing options that benefit those that are impacted, I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what will come out of the committee. Yeah.
Other tourism impacts. I would leave it at that.
To respond to that, I think I disagree, because now we're asking this committee to start making political decisions. This is our job to make the political decision.
We can make it.
No, I know. I'm saying is I don't want them to have to contemplate different percentages. If they're there to study and to try to understand how we can generate and utilize housing, that should come before us. Now, if we want to start saying, well, 10% goes here and 5% goes there, that's our job.
I think that will be part of the conversation. I'm trying to speak to councilors a little bit.
Well, then I think that's where we speak to it as an elected body.
But not as a part of this committee.
Well, it may, you know what, I mean, I'll say this, I don't know what, we can all guess what the committee's going to come back with. Right. We can guess what certain accommodations or attractions people are going to come with. I'm not going to make that decision at this point. If during this process, it comes out that here's a level of funding, it ought to be structured this way, we think it can pass, and we think that there should be some revenue sharing in order for it to pass, or in order to benefit the community, then that may come up. I'm not closing my mind to it. But again, my goal, Charlie, my understanding was, the primary focus is, can we come up with a dedicated source for housing to add to our toolbox to be competitive with the rest of the world right now? If part of that means amenities that go toward those that collect it, that may come up. I'm not going to assume it is or isn't until we're sitting there. Yeah.
Charlie, how does this sound to you instead? The goal of the committee will be to make recommendations on a percentage of monies dedicated towards housing. And then, like, ultimately, what it's saying is, in future, when we have a discussion and we get to some degree of where this attractions and accommodations tax will be appropriated, this committee will discuss and make recommendations on whatever percentage is appropriated towards housing.
My goal is to get these in. I think it's a good purposes, it's a great, dedicated funding source for housing, but it's gotta pass.
Right.
If you have it limited to say, we're just gonna use all the money for housing, which is what the purpose currently says, I think it's not a starter, I think you're gonna lose people from the very beginning. I've worked with these people. I'm sorry.
But that's what Ingrid and I just.
Well, and I agree with you, Charlie. My goal is, first of all, I'm hoping that I don't get people on this committee that come out flat out before we even discuss anything, say, no, this won't fly. My goal is, how do we come up with recommendations for council to make this fly? And if it means what you're inferring, then that'll come up. If for some maybe miracle, this committee says, no, we can do it 100% housing, or 95 or 90, we will see. So that's my goal.
I understand that, Sumner. I'm worried about the wording, the way it's structured. That's all I can say.
Sumner, no, this won't fly. I've never seen a council more out of touch with what the community wants. Wait till November 4th and see how this election goes on the airport, and see the response to what happened tonight. It's going down in flames, and nobody wants this. So you can have 7 people or 14 people or 150 people. This is going nowhere.
Well, and I think if that's the case, Tony, and if it's the case, the council, part of this part of this decision, though, and it should be, I mean, the community can decide too. Part of this decision, to me, and that's one of the reasons I'm doing this, we've got a bit of a toolbox restarted. But part of this decision is, and you and we and everybody else in town is at a critical point. We've got the comp plan coming up. Either we're going to provide housing that people say they want or not. And that to me is black and white, because if we don't take steps further to make it available, it's not going to happen. And we'll keep seeing people move downstream and elsewhere. So it's a critical decision of how much do we, as a community, want to make housing available. And it's not necessarily a growth issue, Tony, I don't agree. To me, it's an opportunity issue. How can our kids move in? How can seniors relocate, et cetera?
We're getting into the facts and
So-
merits of this again. This agenda item, Supervisor vote, is about solely the negative of this committee. Please let's focus the conversation on that. Go ahead.
My one suggestion is just put, the main purpose of such taxes will be to provide dedicated sources. And then you open the door to other sources, but it's just defining, giving a broader definition to what that is. Right now, we're saying the purpose, and instead we say the main purpose. And so that opens up, yes. My motion is that we approve this new committee selection, including a restaurant industry representative, and we change the second sentence of the priorities to the main purpose of such taxes will be to provide a dedicated source of funding for increasing inventory and availability of the affordable and working housing.
Fine.
The motion on call, seconded by Shelley.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Nay. Brian, do roll call.
Mayor Gervis.
No.
Not unanimous.
It's not. No.
I know, he said do roll call.
Yeah, we didn't have unanimous vote.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Mayor Godis? No.
Mayor Gervis?
No.
Okay. Councilor Davis?
Oh,
Councilor Hershey?
No.
Councilor Carroll?
yes.
Councilor Russo?
Yes.
Councilor Stepp?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wellman?
It's a bitch, isn't it, Charlie?
Yes.
What? You did?
You flip-flop it on that.
No, I support what Paul is doing, which is solving the question I had. I just want to make sure we don't turn off the two industries that are gonna take care of this.
Motion passes 4-3.
Next chair.
See you later.
Meeting, Governor.
Governor, never volunteer for things.
I haven't yet.
Would have had houses for 20 years. It's not going to be accurate.
Okay. Housing manager, or I think we would like to name it something else.
Hey, really quickly, thank you, Sumner.
Sumner.
Thank you.
Okay, what do you want to name it?
Okay, well, I don't think we know that yet, but I think we're looking at it more as a higher level than a manager kind of, I think it's named here, housing catalyst position discussion.
Czar.
What?
Housing czar.
Czar, housing czar, I like czar.
I'll make that question.
Oh, just the name.
Attached to the document, it's kind of like, we didn't want to bring a job description, we wanted to bring kind of what the person would do. You know, we've identified a couple of areas where we know we need additional capacity to implement the majority of council's goals. Mobile home park preservation, incentivizing modular housing, code changes, affordable housing funding sources, and ADU template creation, and like a density bonus policy recommendation. I don't want to read this whole thing to you. I didn't write it. Essentially, there are gaps. We know we don't have the ability to really put together financing packages or, you know, the really complicated things you have to know to get housing deals to move is what we really want this person to do. So it's not a planner. It is more of a finance person who does housing. Right, kind of like a KT.
What?
Our last housing director.
Yeah.
Someone who knows how to develop housing, not someone who.
Runs the program, like Access, as a housing director.
Yeah.
Right.
We need someone who knows what they're doing. This is totally your guys' deal, right? So I think staff could use a position if this is what you guys want us to do. This came from council as an idea, and we're responding to that idea. It's more like $150,000 with benefits. What worries me is, of course, we could go into reserves and fund a position for a year, but I don't want to hire someone based on reserves because I don't want to let somebody go if we don't have a stable funding source for this. So that is, plus we may not be able to get someone who wants to move out here potentially for just 1 year. So yes, we have gaps. If you want us to really move on projects and make them happen, we need something like this. But I cannot tell you with a straight face that I think we should hire someone like this until I have a stable revenue source.
I'm gonna wait till after the vote.
Kind of like a parking manager. I don't necessarily want to hire that person until I know there's a revenue source there, because it's just not fair to that person.
Well, I guess I would suggest that it's part of our portion of the new 80-15 split. I mean, this is an impact tourism, unequivocally. So I think that until we know, but we just approved 60 units of affordable housing tonight. We have no one to contemplate how to implement that.
They're built within the next 5 years.
Yeah. But we also need to work with the developer on who qualifies, how they qualify.
Yeah.
So can't we take advantage of Garfield County Housing Authority? I mean, that's what they're there for, is to help in these kind of situations until we're ready to put a person in place and have the funding for it. Why don't we wait? Why don't we use what's out there? And can we do that?
I think, you know, does it get you to be like highly innovative person who's gonna be moving and pushing deals? No, Garfield County Housing Authority is not, that's not what they do.
That's not what I said. What I said is we use them within this interim until we have the funding for that kind of expertise of how to handle. I mean, I know they've taken that up for other towns of how to manage this new development and what to put in place as far as, you know, how they're going to set that up for the affordable housing in those units. I'm just saying, can we find places to fill the gaps outside of staff until you have the funding.
I can tell you, we will do the best we can.
And we have something to comment on?
I think Hannah has been working with the housing authority to talk about what that would look like for us, so there is in the budget money that is intended to be for exactly what you're saying, working with Garfield County Housing Authority for the management qualifying, sending out compliance letters, all those sorts of things for the houses that will, or the units that will come on through the inclusionary zoning. And then they would also manage our for rent program. We just don't have, we have, I won't get the number right, but it's a handful, 20 some, 30 some that were created through the rental program. And so we have been doing the compliance checks ourselves, but it has been our intent that when we move to something that's higher intensity, we have more units, that we would contract with Garfield County Housing Authority to be able to do that.
And do you know what the town of Aspen pays, or do you know what the APSHA director makes?
I do not know. We can certainly find out.
I met,
Well, I just,
That actually was a big point of contention. They lost somebody like a year and a half ago because they were paying them like
I think
$80,000.
no, I think it was like 100, 110, and the new guy's 150.
Yeah, they had to attract somebody.
I think it was about 150, if I'm remembering those articles right, the new guy.
And ours, the midpoint is 150 with family benefits, right? So not as much as that, because benefits are like 30 grand, but.
And what other towns besides Aspen have this kind of position?
In the Roaring Fork Valley?
In the mountain resort community from Frisco to Grand Junction.
I do not know the answer to that question, Paula.
I would guess, I don't know this, but I would guess that any resort community that has a real estate transfer tax or that has a dedicated source of funding.
So somebody who has funding maybe has.
They all have somebody like this, whether it's a planner or finance person or whatever. But yeah, anybody that, like Avon, Vail, they have somebody like this or a department like this.
Okay, that's what we're assuming right now. Okay, I'm just trying to match when we have the funding, then maybe we're looking at this person as opposed to at a time. And where can we support what you need for support until we have the funding to take care of that person? That's what I'm considering. And I'm muffled again, aren't I? Sorry. It goes on and off. So it just feels like we're not at quite the point yet.
Yeah, I don't see us at the point. We're not Aspen, Vail, Breckenridge, any of those communities. And I hope we never are, honestly. And I don't understand this business, but I would think that, in fact, I know that we're really successful at grants. And we don't do it with an employee. We have a consultant out there that chases grants. Our staff helps. But I don't know why you don't have a consultant or a contractor to do this. I would never support an employee.
Well, I'd just say that
That's just out of my ignorance.
right. No, it's abundant. Yeah, it's abundant.
Yeah.
And I would just say that we do have a source, the tourism, we just have an extra 7.5%, as well as 350,000 in reserves. And I think that for us not to commit to what is our number one priority, the community surveyed over and over, say this is their number one priority. So to invest literally $0 or a couple, $20,000, $30,000 into something that is our number one priority that's been identified many, many different times by this council. We have 60 units that are coming at some point online. Maybe someday there might be a transitionary housing development that we could, have somebody work through. But, if we did, and it was like, I don't know, like 40 units, that'd be 100 units we'd have to start contemplating, like, soon. And so to not start investing in this, I think at some point we're going to get bit with a bad deal, and we're going to wish we had somebody that was riding herd on this. So that's my cause for it. I think that the funding is there. We have $350,000 of tourism reserves. We have, 7.5% of 1.3 is about $100,000. So I think the money is there, even if this doesn't pass. And I think it gives us extra incentive to make sure that this potential tax next year does pass, because this is our priority. Sorry.
I want to be clear, it's not that we don't want this position. We would try to hire this position in a heartbeat if we could. I'm laying out our concerns.
My first comment is a nice job of describing what the person would do. I did disagree with Steve. I think it will require an in-house employee, but I also think we need to wait a year to see if we can get the accommodation. So we have a funding source for housing. If we get all that stuff, then we immediately get this fund and put it in the budget in '23. I cannot support this now. I cannot support taking tourism reserves, and the 7.5% you're getting is at less than $100,000. It doesn't cover the nut. And you can start talking about taking tourism reserves to pay for a position. Then are you saying the tourism board's going to support that? I think that's not allowed under the way the fund is there in the first place. And number two, I don't think it's the right place for it. So I won't support the money coming from there. I do think we should wait a year.
I agree.
And I'll just say I really appreciate the initiative and where you're thinking. I agree with it, but I do also appreciate staff's comment and hesitation. And I think that to hire that position before we have a funding stream in place might just lead to frustration and then loss of the employee if we don't have a funding stream for them to put to work, for a project to work on. If we get a pilot project going, I think we can hire a consultant to help us get through that.
So it sounds like we have a lot of comments that no one supports it. Do you still want to give a comment? Okay. All those in favor of delaying this conversation to a future time, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. Nay. Motion passes 5-2.
It's a great job description, or whatever you want to call it. So I enjoyed it.
Hold on to that. It's a good job.
I like the idea, but
I wanted that job.
And yet. All right.
This is, hopefully not controversial. This is literally every time we have something on a ballot, I prep a implementation ordinance that becomes effective only if it passes. So if that's what this is, I'd ask the council to do that.
for the approval of ordinance number 12, series of 2021, enabling ballot measures setting forth authorized use of tax proceeds.
Second. Moved by Charlie, seconded by myself. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Number 8.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, guys. Number 18, approval to construct Everett Trail section of Two Rivers Park.
Okay, very quickly, and I wish I had not had staff come here for any of this. We got a grant, we have a $150,000 grant for the sidewalk. Steve Beckley has thrown in $300,000, and our current budget has $400,000 in it. So we are $50,000, if that adds up to $800,000, all my finance people are gone. That we're $50,000 short to award this project to the low bidder. It came in at over $1 million, and we've gotten it down. We have added $100,000 for lights, and that is what gets us to the $850,000. So the question is, are you guys good going into reserves to get this project fully funded with lights?
Where exactly is this? $850,000.
$850,000. So we have $800,000 ready to go. We just need $50,000.
Like, dark sky compliant.
Yes.
Yes.
They're super bright.
Engineers does consider it a very important pedestrian safety improvement.
So just a real quick question for staff. Is this project one of our top priorities as laid out in our strategic plan?
It's infrastructure, so of course, and quality of life.
And we have the funding.
Is there a motion?
It's just that there's like $50,000 gap, but we would take that as ours.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Nay.
What?
Motion carries 5-2.
Oh, you agree?
I'm sorry, did you vote, Steve?
I abstained.
Motion carries 4-1.
We're getting kind of messy here.
Yeah, that would be a good
You
description.
want to do a
Sure, go ahead.
roll call? Councilor Davis.
Yes.
Mayor Goodis. Mayor Pro Tem Lemon.
Yes.
Councilor Stone.
Yes.
And then money.
Councilor Cal.
Yes.
Councilor Russo.
Yes.
Councilor Hershey.
Yeah.
Motion passes 5-2 with no abstain.
No extension.
Cleans up your minutes.
Okay. All I have is, we need you guys to sign for the thank you cards that you want in this box area.
What thank you?
For boards and commissions, you asked us to send out a thank you card to them when they retire or get off the board, and this is just fulfilling that.
We all signed that one box, did that one box.
Yes.
You're just gonna take a picture and
I think you sign it, and then we turn it into like a JPEG.
I can pass it around.
Yes.
This time in this conversation.
Yeah, in that box.
Michelle, there is kind of fun.
And that is all I have, or all I can remember.
On a slightly more serious note, so I know that you guys have seen there have been some door hangers related to the election. There's been some mailers. I've gotten several citizen complaints regarding that those may not be compliant with the Fair Campaigns Practices Act. We are investigating that, and so we will take a look at what needs to be done with regard to that. I have alerted, as to the mailer, I've alerted the law firm representing the issue committee that there may be a problem and they should probably take a look at addressing that. But yeah, there were two. And so just so that people know that we're hearing them, I've got like 5 of them got dropped off at my office with people who are like, isn't there supposed to be who this is from, what the registered agent is? It didn't have who it was from or the registered. The other one did, but it didn't include the registered agent. Anyway, there's been a lot, we're looking into that. I just wanted to make sure the public knew that we were taking their requests regarding the Fair Campaign Practices Act seriously. So that was it.
Along the same lines, one of the flyers did say that there were no code issues at the airport. The fire chief and fire marshal went out and looked at it today and did confirm there are code compliance issues with both fuel systems. I need to make a decision with what to do with that. They've given us a year to get it up to code and it's still not up to code. So.
We have given.
A year has passed since the fire marshal first went out there and informed us that one of the flyers that was sent out to, I think, the whole city said there are not code issues at the airport. I asked the fire marshal to go take a look and confirm, because I didn't want you guys to think we were lying to you. He has confirmed there are code issues at both fuel, and so I have to determine what to do with that.
Never, we do not doubt that you would lie.
No.
We do not think that, and go ahead, Shelley.
I'm just thinking with the current, are we still in public?
Yep.
Okay, with the current, everything going on right now with the airport, I would like to just see some things in writing. Who's responsible for taking care of that code issue? Is it city or is it airport board? If airport board has known about it for a year and it hasn't been addressed, it's a city-owned property. I'd like to have a better understanding of that and where we stand on that. And so before we would take an action such as shut down or something.
I would not shut the airport down. I may give them 30 days. And it's a weird, complicated issue because the Jet A fuel the fuel itself is sitting on county land and is not compliant.
Right.
It's not on our land, it's owned by a private person, but when you're fueling, you're sitting on city land.
So are we documented that we've known about it for a year and it hasn't been addressed?
Correct.
So she's not asking for feedback.
Yeah, we're just letting folks know that there were some statements that aren't factually accurate.
Right.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
I'll start watching.
For a bigger conversation, it's a better conversation after the November.
Anything else?
What I just heard from Shelley, though, is that it might be helpful for us to have a better understanding of the,
Responsibility.
exactly, if you guys could prepare that, that would be fantastic. And then also, just like, in turn, I think that that will answer where the liability lies. Thank
I will give you guys an update, but yes, I want to be very clear that whatever action the fire marshal takes, it will not.
Of course.
That's fine, yeah. That's a code issue.
Yeah, it's a
Correct.
code issue that we don't have, yeah.
I would like to micromanage.
Lieutenant Kimmer now who's our.
All right, Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 6-1.
Justin, thank you for your help again tonight.